5. Just send me whatever you have and tell me if, you know, what you need to do.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
True, did you bring your pencils?
Yeah, I didn't bring paper though.
Do you want some?
Can you do it?
Do you rather flop paper?
Yes. I didn't realize you had it.
Yeah, I got you.
We're back in business.
I feel like I'm shaking like an ass load of paper. Hopefully,
For speed.
yeah, hopefully you don't need like 7
Send me what you have. Just tell me. You did? Okay, sorry.
Wait, I'm like, I've got like a mad long extension cord.
I'm good for.
Oh, there's one back there on the wall.
I got the one. I can remember. I'm not gonna do it. That'd be something right. Right away, sorry.
I sent the one you see second ago. So.
Okay. I think you should.
I don't even fast. Don't only read like 4 off of them.
Huh?
That's pretty fun.
Oh. It's actually 14.
A through Z.
I feel like you've hit me with 14 before, were you?
Have we?
Probably
In high school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've done that, for sure.
I don't even think I was that fast.
Probably not that fast now.
Yeah. I'm honestly slower now.
USC, did you pick the USC?
Let me double check. Yes. Let me download.
We good to go?
Alright, it's open.
Yeah. One sec. I don't even know which folder I saved it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Contention when his offsets, voluntary carbon markets are segmented, high integrity liquidity is plummeting due to the fear of greenwashing, universal risk, ongoing crackdowns on certification and disclosure fail because they don't address the legal nature of contracts continuing in 24 VCM liquidity, low prices dispersed volatile more than 9% worth of scale, requires standardization, legal certainty, emission reduction, subject to revision, explosive margin, reputational, legal risk, certification, market segmentation is only partially addressed concerns of buffers and stricter standards on credits and disclosure prevent greenwashing, not address the nature of credits and contracts, and production-based financing rather than project finance and fluctuating assets, bonds which generate a coupon only benefits materializing right, level of risk sharing, works of fine language, insurance, and incentives keeping some risk with investors, desirable benefits depending on the carrier guaranteeing a purchase price for carbon coverage protects investors from market risk, but not production risk. Tariffs only magnified segmentation and dampened demand, quantum, and 4. 3 tough tariffs can dampen VCM demand and further fragment the global market more segmented trading. Trading offsets as commodity spots and forwards doesn't address legal and reputational uncertainty about low integrity abuses nor high integrity reversibility, particularly key to boost liquidity, Aldi, and 24 growth and offsets dependent on integrity rates concerns history of risk and low income communities and color shift running from the global north to south, the segmented market with lower integrity, greater uncertainty, especially in neighborhoods that reduce defund depend not only on investment today, but preservation for decades, wildfires, not only good faith after verification, and auditing can eliminate the offsets will deliver less limitations and structuring offsets as commodities require high liquidity benchmark contracts need to dominate market share key assumptions, uniformity, preference toward high quality market segmentation, complicated standardization, plus challenges of screening, climate disclosure, regulation applied, bottom liability experience, and illustrates market liquidity fell. CFTC just published and will update guidance to standardize contracts, mandate disclosure, and crack down on fraud, but that won't provide markets the confidence to differentiate high and low integrity that's key to liquidity. Dumas in 24. VCC's in charge of greenwashing, fraudulent abuse, no one trying to present the illusions of sustainability funded illegal. Claim parents many now has to fear to buy fearing fraud or trailing locals, especially to shame and reputation already taken as so mainly treated once by CTC is taking first steps of guidance. That examiner for derivatives and forces as CTC is committed to tackling fraud, much more accountability essential. Only they can transform to legitimate CTC oversee contracts and to GHG to manage TCM sources. Only contracts not susceptible to manipulation to CTC encourages to consider whether address risk reversals such as offers quality dependent on the CTC will update its cash must go further and establish concrete benchmarks and enabling stakeholders to address whether the market is viable. To lure illusion CTC should require to include mechanisms such as insurance interest. Reversal will allow evaluation to take fraud and create trust in what is now a broken system. Trump does not thumb and so on 24 willingness to set recover markets, including marketing disclosure requirements, demonstrate increased oversight, expect Trump online. Certain Biden initiative without impact on cover market regulation to provide voluntary efforts rather than policy level control down. But retrenched not state, Washington, California, Hawaii continue momentum in many states compliance markets. His transactionalist approach to foreign policy can damage global conflict drivers, but requires leverage. He currently lacks over the global South slaughter 25. The growing entity middle powers center in the U.S. Trump accelerating the shift transactional perspective past difference which is the powerful management marketing power middle powers have plenty most powerful assets ability to walk away Trump. Instead of being peacemaker and force to prevent new ones to win those deals, not arms. Many countries will be eager to come to the table, bulls by the power to walk away with the deal. It's not to their liking. Scaling up BCM financing unlocks U.S. negotiators' ability to leverage it. Wagner and 22 investment is much more than the development and money will come from private regardless of what governments do. Unlike one negotiators call create a solution to U.S. carbon outlay. Post to use carbon credits to fill the gap, clearly something that hitching needed aid to private financial flows to trillions with global south helping scale up. That dampens approximate causes of great power escalation. It's not about revisionism nor polarity. Existential conflicts more likely to emerge from interactions with middle powers in the global south whose perceptions of hegemonic competition generate resistance, cooperation, switch. In 23, war with the Republic of Russian and Chinese agitation, more multiple war with the greater force of the global south, the same fight, cash, contributive balancing, and diplomacy, but like the will exacerbate instability, previous transitions, no to try behind escalation and spillover conflicts, all increased probability war through middle powers, conflict, which great powers in a complete outgrow out of aggression, miscalculate pull, great powers in a major part toward dangerous sides in the Caucasus, Mid East, South, and East Asia, not both not an anti-colonial third block, disaggregated, mosaic motivated by national imposed challenges to managing risk in a world resistant to being recruited, context, motivated privacy, or retrenchment, the U.S. badly needs well-funded sustainable development, could significantly increase its stake in developing nations vulnerable to climate change, regional and proxy conflicts, risk nuclear escalation, even if not directly, they create a self-reinforcing cycle that erodes every constraint, risking deterrence failure. Samson in 24 fuel, by collapse of cooperative mechanism, challenges faster to celebrate how work is in Ukraine, Russia, the Middle East, SES, and elsewhere spread and intensifying conflicts as elevates risk of regional conflict escalation, the spectrum full scale global conflict, looms arms for the threat of nuclear annihilation, may deter indiscriminate use of nukes, effectiveness in preventing catastrophic scenarios and certain proxy wars that not escalated directly involve large nuclear power spreads to conflict, general erosion of co-op hot wars, the Black Sea, Suez, and SES, key choke points for foods and goods, disrupt global supply chains, be cultural isolation from fomenting populist nationalism, independently transactional cooperation with middle powers is vital to overcome collective action problems, vectoring many existential risk, Park and 22 spaghetti bowl, globalization brings complexity, system-wide risk, backlash, great power politics, compound these challenges, collective action problem, existential risk like global health finance, migration, inequality, demand, greater co-op to sustain coexistence under Trump, need middle powers to blast, volatility and sustaining international co-op. Contention 2 is finance. Global financial crisis is uniquely likely to stem from offset derivatives as trenching, crypto, and moral hazard make risks. Impossible to pricing, Kong and 23 supreme, government most likely come from also all the previous standards of governance, vulnerable to manipulation, fail in the gross securitization by only magnifies average selection, senses advice, diligence, and start by currents, significance, stability, risk, not materialized so far to a limited size and function of ETS, proliferating, increase the scope of risk, away causes trade security, unable to assess thousands of subprime data, global economic downturn, contradict channels, transmit uncertainty to the wider economy of blockchain. Crypto and NFTs will exacerbate problems renewing demand for low-quality zombie products controlled by speculators, created bubble, conflict of interest, inherent brokers, own equity states and fund auditors, Interpol, warn trigger financial crisis on par with that way. The current buffer pools approach only magnifies these risks, especially in uncleared over-the-counter transactions. And unlike other scenarios, there's no bailout Trudeau. In 23, future impossible to assess counterparty risk and clearing house required to contribute collateral to risk, vulnerable sufficient cover counterparty default insurance. Even in a catastrophic loss trade settle, moral hazard not permitted. A buffer pool introduces risk because our credits not dollars don't become more than moral hazard. Clear the pool not sufficient cover. And received a level problem high quality withdrawal can do a bank run, but in that case, the Fed step in registries and don't guarantee or proceed. Risk diversification, obfuscate actual risk finance have centuries of less to do corporate into VCM to improve risk management and increase competence. Financial crisis overwhelms efforts to manage inevitable polycrisis. Feedbacks compound nonlinear increases in existential risk lords. In 24, humanity facing a perfect storm of crisis, interacting impacts worse than existential risk conscious individual that's already intersected with stresses, polycrisis, unprecedented, far more interconnected, positive feedbacks, systemic risk, or endemic can be managed by reforming. Neoliberal order, but not eliminating, not just accelerating, also synchronizing, cause risk, critical, quintessential feedbacks, overwhelm, same correcting code, turmoil for financial crisis, creates populist, weaken rule of law, efforts to decouple case, decrease international co-op, for benefits of globalization, which worse than econ turmoil, problem migration, reaction, trigger, state collapse, civil interstate war feedbacks, are certainly not inevitable, but escalate our problems in a catastrophic spiral. Nuclear escalation is likely in every hotspot, and all existential risks become unmanageable. Chemical tool will sharp in 24 downturn. Risk interstate conflict trigger, other risks escalate hotspots, Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, power 7, road guard, Russia, stabilizing, finance, contributed, conflict, conscious, and overall capacity to respond, power ratios, escalate, conflict evolving, nukes, accelerate, inadvertent escalation, frozen conflict, continue, including Balkans, Kashmir, Korea, soft landing, prevailing amid stronger growth in the U.S., new stocks to be unmanageable, decades of resilience, shift away, risk, ecosystem collapse, resource shortages, adverse AI reflecting, existential risk, empirics prove, other studies don't account for Trump's protectionism and propensity for lash out Chung in 24, diverging conflict interaction with other variables, primary explanation based on empirical atrophy support because the economy was better, saturated economic slowdown, increased military conflict, leaders, seek diversionary targets can mobilize their base and marginalize opposition. Russia trying to become revenge because their economies went downhill. Asymmetric and independence contributes increased aggression. All states will engage in more protectionist policies in this context to be especially concerned that the slow growth causes diversionary use of verse. By the way, no recession. Ernie and 4-3. Economists and market experts say expect inflation, but not a recession. Believe there's still room for growth even with headwinds. Still think the economy will expand while dust settle. Markets maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher. Even as shaky over short-term themes. Expected to drive growth gains in AI and automation will remain intact. Investors just have to wake up while companies sort through terror-related strategies. Thus, the plan: the United States federal government should start to use a deposit refund instrument for carbon reversal of offset energy emissions in the United States. Contention 3 is solvency. Treating offsets as performance bonds in derivative contracts is key to identify and eliminate low integrity and unlock financing by high integrity. All the in 24 important to address one of the characteristics of an offset is a commodity or bond offset can be securitized in model condition coupon payments and the emission coupon to deliver buyers expensive contractual risks of social value offsets and form bonds as well as the charge pricing could address permanent additionality linkage to differentiate from high quality to proof. Liquidity bonding and insurance reduce financial risk and offsets offset validation insurance that covers replacement costs could be required by linkage securities reduce risk buyers face of failures to maximize the impact of diversification, lower cost of financing, derivatives, encourage investment in high integrity CTC. Proposed factors in leasing are achieving potential required standards, encourage liquidity, and enhance integrity. Standards should address parameters of standard derivatives, contract, and regulatory oversight. That functionally applies Dodd-Frank to exchanges and over-the-counter derivatives as margin for clearing counterparty risk neck. In 11, Dodd-Frank never regulated with the discretion relevant to carbon markets derivatives. The swap must comply with reporting and margin requirements applied to unclear derivatives, including house regulated by CFTC to offset greater risk weight and as many economists focus on OTC derivatives outside oversight online for excessive risk-taking policymakers, which would start with Dodd-Frank rather than create conflicting requirements for a carbon market. U.S. regulation is necessary and sufficient. McQuaid in 23, standardized contracts able to accommodate different treatment across jurisdictions establishing a legal nature should be priority for regulators. Don't need to harmonize across jurisdictions. Most issues and registries are U.S. means pay close attention to the legal nature of the U.S. standardized secondary trading, facilitate liquidity with common drug quality, and effectively allocate responsibility and fraud. It's the only politically feasible way to expand global financing, but leverages U.S. market power to bargain effectively. Victor in 11, engage no country requires massive change the only politically feasible ways offsets to keep costs in for budget and career perversions and make it harder to engage credibly because it pays countries to avoid strict policies. The U.S. marks power by adopting rules to identify and reward with higher price and high quality rather than a race to the bottom. Having lower leverage on more the rules that sits in the whole market makes it easier to negotiate without monopolies. CFTC guidance empirically denies and thumps links. As future updates get more specific and strict. Northern 24. Marks that preservation, lack of regulation, and fraud market conducting diligence, contract guidance, and whistleblower alert, placing affirmative obligation to perform diligence. On derivatives, DCM's already outperforming much potential for regulation by enforcement. Seen aggressive enforcement of regulatory commission statement shows appetite probably next likely to go beyond guidance to directly impact buy-side true enforcement authority. Coming wave of anti-fraud enforcement does too. Davis in 24. CFTC alleged fraud against Newcomb, CQC, and Steele. SEC and DOJ brought parallel actions. Penalty of $1 million. Increased scrutiny demonstrates proactive stance to shape regulatory framework standardization aims to create reliable market participation review to ensure compliance developments will be crucial. I'm good with process.
Okay. One sec, my laptop's kind of freaking out. Okay. Yep. What does the plan do?
Establishes a deposit refund instrument for carbon reversal energy emissions in the United States.
Okay, so like I'm interpreting this as like a bottle refund instrument, right? Like when I buy a glass bottle from a grocery store. In terms of carbon offsets, how does that function?
Julian probably knows this.
I don't know what you mean by the bottle refund. The way that the plan works is that when anybody buys an offset, so they would be doing so to offset energy emissions, they pay a tax on that offset. If their offset is deemed to not be fraudulent, which is their burden to demonstrate, they get their money back via
How do you determine whether or not an offset is fraudulent?
Whether it decreased emissions.
How do we determine
so
that?
if the
Who determines
emissions,
that?
well, so there's a handful of ways that this happens. There are third-party verification, which is probably the most likely way it would happen. They use
Why isn't
things
that third-party verification occurring now?
Well, it is, but all of them are fraudulent, which is the issue.
So we use the fraudulent third parties to check if...
No.
Offsets
The offsets are fraudulent, not the third-party verifiers.
So the third-party verifiers are currently verifying. What they are discovering when they do that verification is that these offsets are bullshit. And therefore they are triggering Advantage 1 because they're bad offsets that do not give money to middle powers who need it, and it triggers Advantage 2 because
that makes
they're
sense.
mispriced, which causes financial risk.
Advantage 2, Jung is about slow growth. You've read the last part of the advantage says growth is increasing now. What is like the key internal link that's unique?
The bottom card says is a brink argument. It says there is room for growth. It does not say growth is happening now. The Jung evidence is a theory. It's not a slow growth impact card. It is a thesis claim about diversionary conflict in the context of economic downturn.
Okay, what is the internal link to it? I kind of disagree about this whole growth increasing now not thing, but like what is the internal link to Jung then?
To Jung. Jung is the internal link to poly crisis.
Explain further. Like what does that mean?
Well, we think that there is a unique financial risk now from carbon bubble assets because offsets are mispriced. Every sector of the economy buys offsets, so it's permeating the economy. We think that the risk is that when that bubble pops, it will be a polycrisis. The difference
How does the plan
between,
solve is my
well,
question.
well,
Because
so
it-
bailouts
yeah.
is the reason. So the reason that 2008 wasn't a problem is because banks had money in the bank to bail out. The issue is that the CFTC and other banks don't have money for offsets. That's why the deposit solves, because
Okay,
we give them money
I wanna
via tax,
talk about
and then they
Advantage
can collect
1.
that money and
So
use
what
it
is the
to bail
impact
out.
scenario for Advantage 1? Like who goes to conflict? Who are these middle powers?
Well, so there's two. One is not engaging with middle powers makes them less likely to not, or makes them less likely to engage in scaling down regional conflicts. R1AC evidence lists a number of hotspots that are likely to escalate in the status quo
Okay,
in Europe,
engaging
in
middle
Asia, the
powers.
Middle
What does
East.
that mean? Like we froze US aid. What does it mean to engage middle powers? How does
Well,
the
it
plan
means,
solve?
well, okay, that is uniqueness for the advantage. Like, because they have not, like, they have decreased resources and aid in the status quo. The plan would necessarily increase aid flows and money and offset resources to those countries, which necessarily
How does the
results.
plan increase aid flow?
We buy offsets.
6, 2, 1. Send. You pass me sand, if that's okay. Thank you.
I got some notebook paper.
I feel like, do you need more?
I got.
Yeah, we
I
have.
feel like I gave you like
No, you're.
a handful of paper.
Do you know if there's a restroom near here? Like, is it
No, I obviously have a spiral one.
Down the hall.
down the hall?
Not good. Go,
Nah,
go,
it's
go,
good.
go.
It's good.
Run,
It's good.
run, 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 run.
Okay, I'll run.
You should
I'm
go,
also
because I
gonna
need to
run
figure
that.
out when to after, unless we go.
Oh, okay.
I'm also.
Are you share? You share? Can you find out? Come on.
Can't do it.
It's like you're
What are you
judge.
talking about? I got like.
United States federal government should prospectively grandfather a price on greenhouse gas emissions from natural gas.
Or you know what you should say? The nuclear family.
I don't think we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
I don't think Grandstrom would care about it either.
That's the thing. Like, I feel like there's gotta be something saying you gotta grandfather it.
24. They're 1AC. It's like, the fuck is this?
Dude, what? This is like when I see you see like a local Kansas tournament.
This document is not verbatim.
I don't do this in college, but like, I team take they did the fake tag thing. I was like, I would do that. I just like because it was really too much. I was so mad. This is a lot. This is plus your name.
Oh, it's editing or something.
This is plus your name.
Yeah,
That's bullshit.
this is so bad.
It's so many pictures needs to the P. It was like a it's the
They even made the tag size to be historical. Holy shit. I would certainly just sit here and do this, but it's cheating.
Did they make all their tags sites?
It's so many things.
Yeah, the doc is like, I guess it's unedited.
They sent out an uneditable doc that is not verbatimized, and every single site is in, or every single tag is in emphasis format, so
Oh
you
my.
can't even select all fix them because that would select all the emphasis.
Oh my god.
I feel, yeah.
One of my old coaches in high school told me to do that.
It's pretty smart.
It's,
Yeah, it's just like, and also like most judges are probably not like to like do anything about it.
yeah. Don't match them.
Yeah.
Everyone got the 1 and 0, right? Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
for your kid, or just put it in there.
I
Oh,
bought
it's
him-
okay. My thing's charged.
So
Doesn't
he
matter.
got traded the Sunday morning of Texas. And my brother like texted me and was like, "What the hell are the Lakers doing?" I was like, "What do we do now?" And I saw we got Luka, and I immediately bought a jersey for him.
How good has he been? Like,
Huh?
I feel like he's been kind of inconsistent, but I've been watching a lot of
He's been
basketball.
amazing.
Really?
Don't talk about my fancy like that.
He's just not a very good volume shooter at the moment, but he'll ease into it.
I'm a Warriors fan, so.
Alright, let's get the order.
6-2-1.
Oh, no, you gave it earlier. No, I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, I
No worries.
forgot which file was real.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. More back. You're good, right? Okay. First off is the critique, the ass undergirded by economic style, reason, national zero policy, favor, urban 22 economic style, starts with incentives, externalities, right, and authority, esoteric circle, appreciation, markets, efficiency, not mean, markets work does not mean they see government's role in creating a government policy goes value through returns efficiency and neutral, considering efficiency means inflating values, normal politics, environmental politics, not reflective of economic reason, difference, or upset, justification, logic, environmental policy, system services, fielding capture, independence, living, and non-living elements of that, world people and people, call demand, environmental justice, EBA, responding to demands for racial justice, economic calculation, power, economic reason, reciprocity, during new concern, the framework, everything, evaluates the cost of violent language, moral paradigm, has been relegated to the margin place, constraints on possibilities, meaningful change, it's not like using the myth of Mises promotes elite rent seeking, which locks in monopoly capitalism, which subverts any supposed benefits of neoliberalism, only moral critique of economic authority, with successful climate transition, Davies, and 24 market capitalism, different markets, transparency capitalism, anti-market, no passing monopoly, control, concentration of power, exceptional profit, creating conditions for exploitation, virtues of markets, overwhelming capitalism, like markets, extremely hard, difficult to justify economics, exclude theories, emphasize power, cling to orthodoxy, price incentives, feel understand energy transition, government to stand back as price because none of this happened. Why profitability? Appeal of fossil fuel advantage of anti-market monopoly, right? Decarbonization, which we count on. Here on money funds are cheap, depends on the capacity of existing political, economic, social, regulatory, environment, finance, also way investors, and judging opportunities across a wide variety of asset class problem, big ability, investor increase price stability, industries characterized by concentration, monopoly, power, and government support, pressure to conditions, imposed on beneficiaries, makes sense to abandon reliance on market, simple capitalism, more just more centralized. Authorities have a midst of the free market, gives to years, wait for revolution from market, as sufficiently state, as power, warning capacity to direct capital, extinction, inequalities, limited on adaptation, only democratic chain system solves Buckdale and Harris, 23 acre giant leaves required fundamentally reconfigure economy calls really encompass more than incremental change capital according to the expense of social and environmental conditions, mainstream analyses, leaving untouched prevailing social capital portrays climate change, profit demands, and pollution, adaptation require around now opportunities to global social and economic order, limiting warming emissions are rising, probably result will be temperature rises by 2.9 degrees Celsius with massive policy intervention to transform markets appears technologically for polluting and possible and counterproductive emissions must forego revenues while they may be practical means for limiting warming, no pillars economic constitutional path, existing gravity distribution inadequate relative to the scale and place of climate change, current institutions already nature significant temperature rise, adaptation have to address feelings of day, adaptation means sporadic, maladaptation leading to greater problems, installing air conditioning means more energy, supposed to new source conflicts, cloud drives, fires, and all we call adaptation, low apply responsibility to be a reaction to disaster and alternate social profits which imply social relations clever aggressively constitute a hard limit on the capitalist adaptation, planning capacity, democratic decision making, production for needs rather than profits are central successful adaptation, equal social atmosphere, democratic adaptation, regarding decision making process problems line the country develop power and equality to supplement adaptation. Adaptive capacity, advocacy, field side identify global capitalism, also reducing inequality, democratic and social make equitable, response feasible, the alt is global green populism movement 22 movements exist for a long time, boredom, spontaneous protest, destruction of culture by economic and administrative power apparatus, multiplication, disaster, awareness, question of climate as well, among constitutions of public citizen, creating war attempts to political more interesting proposition, navigate radical ecological bifurcation involves rupture with financial collapse, we should rescue the democratic ideals, become the value of quality, the democratic country must be defined, refusing for us, listening by radicalizing markets who are new dimensions, the struggle for justice requires protection, question productives and drivers and models, growth has become a danger, proposed, efficiently ecological bifurcation, democratic revolution, refuse they redefine democratic principle revolution, reactivism, enrich democratic geometry, as an everybody that commits FX that could be more powerful and more credible than neoliberal discourse between democratic revolution, articulating many fields, democratic struggles, ecological bifurcation, profit charge, the word attempts to harness vulnerability, demands committed to the progressive way to some the love to impede by articulating progression, blindness, predatory, project of federated variety, no, democratic next up the states, count on the 50 states and relevant sub-federal territories should start to use a deposit refund instrument for carbon reversal offset energy emissions in the United States. The federal judiciary should rule that in the absence of federal policy in this area, states adopting a deposit refund instrument for carbon reversal of offset energy emissions in the United States is legal principle. The counterpart resuscitates an entrepreneurial federalism that's key to great power competition. Teach in 125 the U.S. entered new area of national security. Defining great power competition with China and Russia, using the soul is the only actor numerous states have adopting measures to prohibit business with China, federal state actions of states and FG on the collision course. Theories include foreign cooperative federalism, non the states act outside of a federal program, rule for themselves, entrepreneur, so. Courts may be tempted to rely on preemption that disabled states market broad preemption therefore the four rules useful in first is gap filling statute, second is productive fishing states, provide states trigger reasoning given by executive that proves the decision making, challenging grouping to preserve states' ability to supplement and produce fishing workers to Dutch to use narrow preemption theory to avoid displacing state law to protect national security prerogatives without holding infringement on states about the respects since World War Robinian 17 if the U.S. no longer guaranteed security all powers around Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Egypt decide they can defend by acquiring nuclear weapons, conflict will assume the Asia primacy has provided decades of stability, isolation, policies hamper global trade, created the condition for revisionist power to start a world war left to unchecked countries will threaten security interests especially if they depend expand their nuclear political capabilities. Next up is T. Market-based instruments internalize the cost of emissions via taxes or tradable permits. Regulations like the app and command and control schemes violate our laws. In 17, NBIC to address market failure, externalize incorporated cost of pollution or consumption through tax or facilitation establishment of proxy market. This ever refers to internalization of costs, which makes sure that damage caused by pollution reflected in market NBI reform regulations. Latter do not directly modify prices, even compliance is costly. Vote negative for limits and ground. It's the only non-arbitrary resolution of constraint. Anything else makes the topic meaningless, explodes the floodgates and saps coordinate ground. Next up, advantage capital. The United States federal government should design a relief program for developing world debt and the promotion of equitable growth and substantially increase funds appropriate to the Green Climate Fund and increase funds for international disease response and provide regional powers of defensive denial capabilities and reappropriate previously withdrawn funds to USAID and implement a differentiated collateral valuation framework and capital reserve compliance calculations. Applying ground collateral haircuts to the valuation of assets posed as collateral. The counter plan solves advantage to better. The plan's private approach doesn't bridge the gap with the global south. That's 1 AC Squares and 23 we read yellow. The US badly needs a well-funded initiative of sustainable development can lead into designing a relief program for developing world debt and the promotion of equitable growth. We significantly increase the stakes in the Green Climate Fund. Boost the US leadership on and support for global pandemic preparedness and health security services to provide vital powers with active denial capabilities. Denial capabilities to insulate them against a revision actors. Last plank solves finance, if not all cause. Mercy Good 22 Fed accepts the collateral line between various bankruptcy coming out of crisis risk of systemic short financials but not properly. Corporate climate risk in section 33. Discount window lending, acceptance of collateral declaration, believes the value of risk of mortgage-backed securities. Mortgage-backed securities, corporate bonds and other serious risk. Mortgage market by physical risk, wildfires, hurricanes, flooding, and no requirement to disclose wildfire risk when selling homes. Increased rate of defaults 40% on the coast, 1 trillion subject to no regardless of tsunami, sea rise, insurance trouble predicting based upon past and record loss, increased premiums, no available insurance perception of no stress present not a great risk into haircut. Next up, politics. Senate passed Badger resolution, but House passage is key to unlock reconciliation, but UP unity is fragile. Result is today. Senate approved budget plan 451-48, the first step toward bill to make permanent tax relief and investment in national and energy security. House instead need pass identical versions to get reconciliation when they face up. We'd rather have this than yeah. Okay. On the base level battle, it's another 5 trillion tax cuts. The Senate cuts around 4 billion to avoid default. Senate would raise debt million 5 trillion views for default would be disaster for global econ. Marked at disaster for global econ. The plan is viewed as departure from the GP's drill baby bill. Drill approach Delaware and 2-3 Trump success Trump's from ways to change his policy in the origin of Trump inaugural address include drill baby drill. Every time Trump enters the phrase, he reminds Republicans he's fighting for what they desire. Since 70s, Trump's looking to disband mental regulations, environmentals put in place with Pennsylvania. He made certain voters' news vision, including fracking, exos, boosting gas, production, removing policy, export LNG coalition between Republicans built around policy. Budget resolution includes the REINS Act that's key to effective admin state Ivancha 214 REINS Act, requiring congressional approval for any federal rule with a econ effect of $100 million. Currently, regulations are automatically become law as Congress takes action to approve the REINS will fund right now. Amendment states on kind of administration never rule of lives. Admin state crushes pandemic response. Proto 720. The regulatory state is failing. The rule set to governor define a response to pandemic bureaucracies of independent influence. The most significant failure to regulatory state CDC developed test procedure. Those proposed at the same time legally prevent Americans from pursuing other testing options. Without saying, Washington State saving lives. The FDA should not such testing for PPE regulations, discourage supply, required permits for recruitment, failure, trade restrictions, and enterprise gouging laws, limit supply chain. Amnesty has become too inflexible, not focused on outcome systems, not working. Our regulatory state is complacent. Pandemics cause extinction guardian in 22 dangerous scenario. Highly contagious disease with symptoms that manifest only years after infection. Disease that results in extinction is not due to deadly long-term damage to reproductive systems, device moms. More effective virus can teach future existence. Social restrictions reduces transmission. Should reduce transmission. But what about diseases? Use intermediates. Corona pass from animals to humans. What do you want me to say?
That's fine. You can just move on.
Okay. Second advantage. Growth is unsustainable and causes extinction. Sport in 21 with 1 degrees. We see severe impacts of typically moving uncontrollable extinction threat by loss of present humans depend on ecosystem stewards. Scientists agree growth of a trade as extraction must be quickly curtailed. Newest emissions reduction occurred during recession. Reduction in the world necessary to address all the rapid extinction current use. Already surpassing nitrogen, biogene, climate, and triple illustrated thermodynamic and possibility of growth trajectory. Even innovation substitution induces catastrophic outcome. Harbor pricing, improvement efficiency, renewable energy, and geoengineering. Two Vaughn's paradox increases use regardless of efficiency. Emissions increase renewables assume one unit will displace fossil energy. Expansion increases supply spread demand. Renewables have lower EROI. Geoengineering is effective and unproven market. Proven global interdependence enables rapid scale down following decline. Jones 21 future conditions will be more dangerous scale threats to biosphere to all life forms difficult to grasp. The time representing significant inflection and atomic points, including a collapse of society. Economic depression can lead to collapse and decline complexity. Isolated pockets arriving to grow power down. Global society preferable to economic environmental collapse. Changes of reversalization, including energy and resource use, interconnections, growth, drought reduction could occur as a short event. Could lead to rapid decouplification of less than 1 year. Feedback mechanism and cascading. Resulting significant changes to organized and society. Reduce energy mobility, size, and distribution. No impact to economic decline, but growth turns a bomber in 20 studies. Link occurrence of award expansion of the variety war chest with finance propensities, a function of higher degree of willingness to fight authors. Link growth to optimistic FOPO growth increase likelihood states involved the fatalistic phenomenalized world growth push to acquire colonies and mark at to acquire as colonies and market. We all know Weiss chart is a joke. Inserted 1 AC Weiss chart in yellow. Jung is inapplicable. That was crossings about slow growth and talking democracy, which they can't spill over to. Okay, the other advantage. This advantage is incoherent and lacks internal links. A. How does streamlining VCMs domestically magically unlock a more transactional approach to foreign policy? B. Why do VCM regulations in the U.S. spread globally, especially to autocracies? C. Trouble. B. More transactional and diplomatic. The global South. Fuck off. Third tracking doesn't exist. Bracket all 21. and importance of accurate tracking. Emissions you ban one of involved tracking emissions. Carbon for over 100 counting methodologies, each use a different default. Emissions factors, boundaries, and managers, primary data, non-existent data across methodology, 3 scopes, and compare 3 scopes emissions, compare these free to range information, then scopes, double counting, picking, choosing, doing yes work, counting commercial lines, reporting not right, particular counting method, we're reporting 81% of violence companies and currently report emissions, error rate 40%, and none of their impacts here actually have a terminal impact. I'm gonna water, then I'm good.
Yes.
I'm good.
Okay. Status,
Condo status quo is always a logical option.
net benefits.
Advantage counterplan is everything like the politics DA and the turn on case. Politics is a net benefit to the process
Okay,
or the state's counterplan and GDF, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you did not read the rulemaking counter.
No.
Okay. I want to talk about the K.
Yeah.
What will you defend as alt solvency? Is it like a government policy? Is it fiat implementation? What will you defend?
Move specifically outlines that we ought to pursue ecological bifurcation between, or rather a bifurcation between ecology and neoliberalism. I think materially this looks like things similar to like the Green New Deal, essentially, like making
So the alt does the Green New Deal.
not exactly, but it's like more democracy
More-
vis-a-vis
More
climate policy.
democracy? How do you achieve more democracy?
Movements. Move says those exist now. The alt would scale them up.
Scale them up through fiat or what?
I don't think alts are counterplans. We don't fiat anything.
Do
Okay.
you imagine that those movements get scaled up globally?
No, not necessarily. Like,
so what do you
it's,
do?
what do you mean?
So,
How do you
if
solve?
What
The-
the hell does the alt do?
The way like the movements coalesce is through the intersection of labor and climate coalitions. So currently those are bifurcated because of the language of MBIs and price signal language makes these two issues seem like they're less connected than they are.
So
By
the
cohering
alt
labor
abolishes
and climate
price
co-
signaling. Does the
Yeah,
alt
sure. Yeah, yeah,
How,
definitely.
how, wait,
How-
what does that even mean? How?
What?
What is it? What
The-
does that
The
mean?
alt
alt
says
is
MBIs are
paradigmatically
Yeah.
opposed to
Okay.
MBI. It
How is-
instead prefers command and control state-based
sure,
regulations.
Sure. How is the alt different from the collapse that DDEV causes?
What?
Like you've read a DDEV transition argument. How is the alt different from that?
Um,
Like,
Sorry, I'm not even beginning to
are
see the
you
connection.
are you defending like you've read two like green policy alts where we scale down growth? Like,
DDEV does not have an alt, it's a turn.
okay, yeah. What does the DDEV transition look like that is different from the alternative?
The Jones evidence, I think it says that when there is a domestic economic collapse because the U.S. is the largest financial power in the world, that would spread globally. That would allow
Actually, like, can you read a line that says that? Because I don't think it does.
economic depression can lead to collapse.
Yeah, globally? Like, there's the word global, like, isn't in there.
What? It says
I did.
timeframes represent a significant inflection point in the coming years, including collapse of organized societies.
The word global wasn't in that sentence?
It
Sorry,
talks about feedback
your
mechanisms.
card says global. I don't-
Which was
Okay.
global?
The advantage counterplan.
Yeah.
It increases funds for disease response, appropriates funds to USAID, imposes capital requirements. Why does this not link to literally every net benefit?
Like to politics, you mean?
Yes, like you read a link that like regulations on fossil fuels are bad because it strays away from the GOP
The alt
climate
is,
dereg.
or the counterplan rather, is funds for the global south. That is not climate policy, which is our link.
And the net benefits also case turn.
Yeah.
It's the last plank, if that's what you're asking about, it's not about the federal reserve.
Rewind. Grandparenting?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hell yeah. Sitting on this guy since Northwestern. This is the right crowd.
8:59. fixing this is advantage 1 offsets, advantage 2 finance. T.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I don't like
I should have looked up. I was looking down.
1, 2.
1, 2, T. K. Advantage counterplan. The multi-anchor state court stitch. Politics.
I haven't gotten to 2C yet. What you want to do?
Just came in for me.
Oh, we're going to check in.
What? I don't know why.
I still haven't gotten it. Did you just lock it in? Oh, never mind. I got it.
Truly, like, no. And this chair is so extremely No.
Yeah, that chair sucks.
Yeah, it's ass. Okay, are people ready?
Sorry, give me 1 second just to open it. Oh, it's like a, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
dual.
I've been eyeing
I
it.
think Jordan D also has.
It's nice because it's just built in. I mean, portables are not that expensive, but it's cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can just put the thing on it and just connect to it, yeah.
I'll have to ask you if it's as good as it looks.
Do you use it in public?
Do I use it in public? No shot.
Are we good?
Yeah, let's just do it.
Yeah, let's go for it.
What about, yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't catch. Wait, let me zoom in, because this is too small. Okay. Okay. Interaction with middle powers cause distinction. They refuse cooperation because the U.S. is not seeking collaboration, which means that they'll amplify conflicts and promote deterrence. This ranges in Swanson also positive correlation with middle powers. Independently overcomes existential risks like pandemics, finance, migration, and inequality. They already dropped the terminal impact. So it's try or die starting in the 2AC. The first question was how does streamlining VCMs unlock a transactional approach? The reason is because we give other middle power countries money when we buy offsets. We invest in those countries to demonstrate that we are willing to do business with them, and that our companies care about what they do and how they think. The second question, the one that Steve just posited, was why do regulations spread globally? Companies buy offsets in other countries. That's how it works, but they're regulated domestically because that is where they're doing their stock exchanges. The third argument was Trump will be more transactional and diplomatic. Yes, because we are investing with them, so they want to engage, but Trump isn't the one doing the diplomacy. It's the countries and verification agencies that do the offset, the finance advantage. Zero link or impact was not growth, but rather the systemic risk escalating polycrisis. In other words, it was not a recession before the crunch, but rather the crunch itself, which means that their sequencing claims are incoherent. Try or die is backwards. Assessing the relative efficacy of transition is the only decision that actually matters, starting with sustainability and then taking a leap of faith. For anything else is a cognitive error, which is the wrong order of operations. Only avoiding the case has any chance of solving their impacts, no matter how small that chance appears. That's where Lennius, in 23, prospective countries like per capita income for 20 great scenarios, projects, companies, example, decarbonisation, degrowth, leverage, reduce possible of GDP is normal under capitalism. The growth is more likely to degrowth through enablement, economic transitions to pathways of possible degrowth, no longer global pathways to slow to global investments, and not about future less funding more likely with finding for world to intricate good contribution to the growth in the environmental under the pivotal degrowth of the climate arithmetic analysis shows the assumption that a couple things possible loss can be reached by massive economic insurance ability and feasible climate targets also to put the risk of unfounded. The economic crisis is counterproductive. Finance led is the only solvent to degrowth that's tickle. In the 21 degrowth is possible to recession scale down ecology discovery production while expanding socially important sector positions and not discriminate degrowth is representation renewable energy agriculture rate decisions advantage for observations focus on getting growth whatever the culture costs may be. Even if we lose the impact economic collapse, the political effects alone still cause a pro-growth backlash that causes existential polycrisis. That's Lawrence and Bertram. In the intended to block crash down survival of Earth through the war for social conventional specifically nuclear war with likely winter consequences of Ukraine, China, pandemics, and destabilization, fashion, and inequality measures stop. Risking other words was measures common need to degrowth and attempts to campaign out lead to Trump a lot of mileage with right funding rising consumer increase international conflict cooperating possibly actively in pandemics. Their inevitability warrants for sustainability do not contextualize systemic risks are limits to growth, financial complexity, etc. are our impact thereof. Just agrees. Lawrence says that those are quotes now endemic and they can be managed but not reversed, which means degrowth can never solve. But that existential escalation cancellation of them is, quote, not inevitable. That's Lawrence. The sustainability is wrong. We are decoupling. That's right, Gundren. In 25, there's absolute and relative decoupling. Reliable statistics showing emissions have gone down with no theoretical basis for emissions happening. You should think possible decarbonize that your nuclear cell to wind, but there should not want to extend shape of life in the same kind of economy, but the fundamental basis for emissions happening is every energy now carbon is a measure. There are countries that grow without increasing consumption. There's no Boehmer impact term. The war chest is wrong. Their evidence is from the hypothesis section. The conclusion is that it only explains war by poor autocracies, not the U.S. That's Boehmer. In second 20 years, sustainable GDP growth and never missed relation things like demonstrating the military effect of regional attribution payment growth may not lead to war substance compared to others, but doing more change, maybe studies like developed cities have already low the rates of growth and potential regions really growing autocracies. In contrast, downturn within great powers uniquely carries nuclear risk because they're already involved in low-level conflicts that their evidence is about. Studies of the escalation of war among great powers are affirmative, which was the we should have Vincent Anders and answers the argument that Jones card does not say the word global once. This was just embarrassing across sex. The line by line, yes, we sure. It's a list of more than just economic decline because their impact was polycrisis, not just econ decline. So things like inflation, pandemics, climate, etc. are part of the polycrisis. And answer the Jones above on war chest. T. We mean deposit refund is a form of carbon tax that includes performance bonding. If not true, this is a countership. This Fisher in 95 MES focus on emission taxes, favorable performance carbon taxes, deposit refund, carbon removal, combining taxes, subsequent disposal of cells or quantity at the price of deposit refund under certain conditions and performance. Bond applying the emission reduction mechanism for inclusion 6% market base and of tax Saracen 10 more types of taxes whose charges directly apply to emissions or fuels negative tax deposit refund. For one, they overlimit. Two, ask neither which grant the state's counterplan do not sustain the year of eight. We only had one mechanism that's already included as part of the ceiling. Second, Afghan outweighs PR4 when spawning exceeded constitutional preemption deficits. Uniform safety outrights everything else. Three, Fisher's taxonomy was the most predictable. Arlinghouse has no intent to exclude one. It does not require their definition of externalities, just so that it is often what people assume about taxes. It also uses the AOECD, which includes RF that's 294 or Z identifies more than 100 MBS taxes, subsidies, permits, policy, refund, liability, and many others, but we meet it anyway. We price the right externality as Calissa. In 16, carbon emission performance, wildfires, externality, policy, refund, deposits at the beginning, tax, as tax, and the externalities, cover removal, cheats, and royalties, subsidies, sequestration, political taxes, policies, and letters, refund, design. The K. Framework. The battle is referendum on the plan's desirability. Links must be causal and unique with a solvent and competitive alternative. Anything else unpredictable moves the one I see, which estimates procedural fairness and in-depth clash. Now, permutation do both perm to the plan and non-mutually exclusive parts of the alternative. If it's truly a global populist movement, then it should certainly solve the link. 3 net benefits to the perm. 1 case. If it's true, it disproves the links and impacts. Second, link to green fraud regulation with the plan is a prerequisite to public mobilization towards the alternative. That's the Dumas evidence. 3 internal link turns showing rather than merely telling of carbon market failure is the best hope for the alternative. It's Albert. In 24, mapping informed comprehension running prices, sort of Ethiopian aspiration for socialist investment, inflation across the undermines the dollars of change, greed, for radical interventions, suggesting that first necessity to net carbon pricing, and find a second movements to create the different responses for conditions and place in the direction of evolution, eco-socialism, involving numerous separations on the rocket journey. Flat out rejection of carbon regulation ignores that contradictions are inevitable, but coordination is possible in solving which was the one AC Newell evidence. Now, the alternative, global private fiat actor is cheating. There's no literature, and it's impossible for the effort to take, but it causes extinction. That's Albert. In 24, investigators been shot at either others, eco-social self-esteem to resist, decision, eco-social needs to sustain a new forces direction, even using the term of battle space, which is an allocation which is impossible. Only U.S. military power declines. Mark that, and that declines. The sustainability, or the link debate, the markets link does not contextualize, but wholesale rejection due solvency, which is the finance advantage. The advantage counterplan, burn to both, none of the planks are mutually exclusive, and the counterplan shields any risk of link. Do the counterplan, burn to the plan in any combination of planks. Links to every net benefit. It allocates financial flows to the global south, and introduces growth and hurts fossil fuel assets. Capital requirements, which pisses off the GOP. Government funding fails. 1, they don't perceive fiat and don't trust the durability of U.S. politics. They only trust their ability to tax the VC and the Shenyang. And 20 funding public settling tax for market-based schemes in developing countries, 470 unanimous war stable shielders from bakers and politics, empty altruism. Second, foreign aid is not leverage. That's the status quo, which was the argument about Trump, the states and Fed counterplan. Counterplans of fiat state and federal government or a voter excursion literature is unpredictable because they could find any action which works after by stealing the best deficits. They get either a loan which falls or opposite. Perm to the plan as the outcome of the counterplan, perm to the plan and the counterplans in the process, perm to the counterplan and perm to both. It links to the politics now benefit because the federal government is acting. There's preemption. That's woo. In 24, ICC exclusive jurisdiction over derivatives market features constitutes swap on the CA in addition to investigate fraud and interstate commerce. Second, the legal possibility of non-uniformity wrecks uncertainty. Markets want CFTC. This McQuaid. Here's what they do to the individual establish laws, legal judgment, states, common measures, you propose a challenge to legal PC and the review markets that should be regular features regulated CFTC. 3, territorial limitations captured. No class action, and a ton of other thumpers that even if the federal government plank still applies, the states cannot solve it. That's going in 21 complications. Effective under statement from already subject territory restrictions cannot match our season resources of federal regulators. Many resources not enforcing the possible subject to the points class sections only federal others uneconomical, lacking a deterrent effect. Condos of voter restrictions a good time to risk aversion cover distance to solve politics. Their impact of politics is a double turn with the DDEV and the CAPK. The argument is that the government needs to pass a funding bill with $100 million for the administrative state to solve pandemics. Clearly, that is a double turn and a disadvantage to their own alternative. There's also zero evidence that the RAINS Act is part of the budget reconciliation bill. Their own card says it was introduced as its own bill, so I don't really know what they're doing here. Budget resolution won't pass its feller. In the 14th House, the House budget writer predicted it won't like any mention any rule, whatever walk within the framework process. process of rate reduction expenditures later much of thing more than likely one happen of not winning percent to be smooth, a perfect storm of numbers, right passage, and the impact of this Desidero. For forward sticking to both time and energy passes, the event of the problem is a global trade war, major rolling house, and prosecuting persons, chamber signal, panel, balance, and by Doge continuing for many reps, ultimately economically making much more difficult to pass, even if political uncertainties running the tariffs have the effectiveness of the overall package market, really the agency bar, multiple calls, automatic cut levels in general, people spreading support method on subject to favorable parliamentarian ruling, not allowed for us to vote, to approve the atmosphere. Issues are compartmentalized, financial regulations are relevant for budget fights and pandemics. Trump does not push the blame through Congress, and the CFTC shields blame. There's only a race you can claim credit that's medicine. And the intent of the process of being less likely will perceive reduce political costs of presidents, spending agencies for public decisions themselves, administrators take false self-defeating credit for actions like emissions, the agency acting independently, maintaining liability, may not have political price. CFTC guidance empirically disproves the length backlash should have occurred, but it didn't because the plan's popular. That's Utah. In 24 more lawmakers, CFTC do stand fraud authorities police not possible to got legislation like to invest in European contracts like regulation creates financial risk for the legislature consider legislative actions to train the volunteer government signals machine pressure legislation using relative powers to just the government for the single organized that overturning shepherd on additional legislative action may be able to empower the CFTC initiatives and funding for processing criticizing ESG efforts never compromise policy content has always been irrelevant and it's not intrinsic logic papers logical policymaker could do the bill and pass a plan there's no vote switching ideology party affiliation and commitments overwhelm it back to the cap cake here's the sustainability card that's a regular euro and then try to see the most promising paths to sustainable development and business with protection restoration conservation of ecosystems and systemic growth prioritizing whatever future aspirations on innovation one avenues through Ohio facilities knowledge exchange and collaborations and policymakers and support for percent encourage why policy business knowledge and center for CDC to also pay some reservation issue and supply dynamics. They could not explain the outline conflict, so we obviously get new answers because like what the hell is global populism? I'm good.
Were those cards that were read on?
Everything was in there.
Okay, gotcha. Good.
Yep.
Oh, whoa. Okay. First bad floor, the cap case stuff. Anything that was skipped?
Yeah, I didn't read the first Albert card
First
on
Albert.
framework.
Okay.
I also did not read the Winters card on the firm.
Albert and Winters.
I didn't read the Newell evidence, but I read the tag.
Okay. Politics. Confused on why it's a double turn. We said the admin state was bad for pandemics. Response. Explain.
You said your uniqueness card says we should pass a bill that includes $100 in funding.
100 what?
$100 million in funding is what the card says.
Wait, no, sorry. The Reigns Act deconstructs the admin state.
What? Your card is tagged. That's key to effective admin state.
I mean, if you want to I can pull it up here.
It says,
Reigns Act
Will
will rein in our out of control admin state. An unaccountable admin state should never rule our lives. And then we said admin state crushes pandemic response.
but it,
So we just dropped the terminal now.
well, it says regulations will become law. This card, I
Okay,
mean, this seems
that's
to
fine.
be like the world where this is the case is
we
probably
also
not
saw
one
the
that is
terminal.
compatible with
Okay,
government.
DDEV, World Nereus card. I mean, this has a lot of cool claims like warrants. So it says in past economic declines have not decreased emissions. Stewart says when COVID happened, emissions declined. Like past economic declines, emissions have declined. Like what is the warrant behind that claim?
I mean, it says there are no encouraging examples of such.
I just gave you some. Like what do you?
I mean, emissions quickly rebounded after COVID. Once everybody like got out of their houses, emissions actually
Sure, so
increased
the
after
1AC
COVID,
has
which
said-
is our argument because it says that attempts at degrowth and when the recession begins, that people will respond by just increasing emissions and finding other
Yeah,
ways
the
to
1AC
emit.
has said that there's a financial crisis on the scale that's never been seen before. It causes a poly crisis, it collapses cooperation over every existential issue. Why is COVID, applied? Like,
Well, that was the first argument I made about you assuming that the plan is the recession before the crunch.
Yeah,
like
can you-
anything that triggers the crunch, and we've disagreed and said that our poly
yeah,
crisis plan
I
is
don't
the
understand
crunch
this.
itself.
I don't understand this distinction. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. Second Advantage said fraud and voluntary carbon markets causes financial risks. What is the distinction between a recession that is coming out and?
Because our argument, a recession is when growth slows down. That is different than degrowth and a polycrisis. The difference is that merely slowing growth is not the same as like the collapse of the financial system. The reason for that is because it's not like a downturn trajectory where people have time to like respond and build social institutions and like figure out how to emit less and like do all the,
Okay,
all the
I
things
see.
that you think happen.
Yeah, makes sense.
It is faster, and not only so, but it causes the poly part of the polycrisis.
Okay, yeah. So
which is,
polycrisis,
like
polycrisis is like a buzzword that's being thrown out a lot. Like, what specific existential impacts are tied to it, and why is finance a critical internal link?
So a list in Wishart I think includes I don't have it up, but I think it includes at least like the environment, pandemics.
Okay,
things
Wishart
like
is well the
AI,
risks
and-
report, which said that misinformation is the #1 existential risk we should be aware of.
Yes,
Why does that?
That's also part of the polycrisis. Like you literally just had the card that we were like, there are multiple crises ongoing, and you were
It
like,
said
LOL,
economic-
all causes, there are multiple crises.
Economic downturn is number 10. Like okay.
Yes, but we have read an internal link that says that triggers the poly part of the polycrisis, which was the con card that you never answered.
10 starting.
Reasons to reject the team.
Oh yeah, that was just condo, right?
Uh,
Oh no, there's the stuff on the.
well, there was a
States.
handful of theory. There
Yeah,
was
yeah.
an argument on the Capca, one on states, and one on condo.
One on, what was the last one?
Condo was that.
Okay, okay. Where was condo?
States, Fed, combo. The one that's cheating.
$6.40. Why won't it attach?
It's probably open. Close
Can't find the item.
Oh, is it over?
I'm gonna retry. Okay.
What?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone? Did anyone knock at the dock? Like, I can get an order. Okay. Everyone good for an order? The order is the preemption counterplan, the state's counterplan, sorry, the advantage counterplan, advantage 1.
Sorry, one more time.
States, advantage counterplan, advantage 1.
I knew that. Wait.
States advantage counterplan advantage 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you give me order?
What's up?
Here.
No,
I think you're good. Anyone not ready?
The counterplan solidly generates offense based on federal inaction and has the states use a deposit refund instrument and has the courts rule that in instances of federal inaction, states are legally permitted and not barred by preemption. This narrows the preemption theory to exclusive application of conflict preemption rather a broader and capricious applications of field and dormant clause preemption. That's DX21 was permutation due both. Bring it up here because it answers the other two permutations. First is gap filling and productive friction. The counterplan effectively bans the plan and picks out of the federal government prior to state action. Plan inclusion removes the issue and precludes friction. Insert Deeks for reference. It's perceived as over cooperative, not entrepreneurial federalism. The counterplan the law acts as entrepreneurial federalism because the plan removes the issue. Deeks and national state action after they use to cooperative federalism. The state action and national security are entrepreneurial dual is the federal states operate in the separate spheres. The federal exclusivity in the foreign relations of secular security best manifest locally the cooperative share the where states power where states power to challenge the federal premises by missing with the national security actions because states are also responsible for their action as allies outside the perimeter of the overcome states which reinforce the federal more aggressive they were more state action adopted with the overcome states are enacting laws that reflect the national security conservative going beyond the law that typically say the states national security action adopted with the existing federal we force to support the entrepreneurial federalism one state acting areas one adopted by the federal operative the federal the states acting in rules for themselves along the absolute policy experimentation of entrepreneurial federalism emphasizes state independency with the states draw federal status states based on the legal authority Ukraine gap filling the counterplan only coheres in the absence of planned federal gaps to heat decent 25 that could the law states implementation of federal policy that Congress wants and the power to fully break the national security state laws in the gaps of Congress the president of the action the acquisition and Chinese Russian media the collection and such as with the chance of Russian government the plan as outcome is illegitimate intrinsic because it adds an element of time frame and sequencing the way the text is written means it's akin and perceived as due both the perm the second perm is illegitimate because it adds function one ground internal net benefits are get erased it's the only way to produce off this topic especially of the entity when teams break new every round 2 perm gaming text gets shuffled on unpredictable or illegitimate functions to a shape the words off advantage counterplans to fiat out of words and to fiat this has 3 real-world decision makers evaluate policy based on function, not text. Promotes verbal education by comparing function first. For logic ban makes ban the plan non-competitive. It's unpredictable. 5 context words should never be evaluated in a vacuum. Removing them from the original context unpredictable. Turning their offense it also fails. Cross-plan deficit from do both. 1 functionally interpretation of the function of the purpose defined by the way which most closely defines the only card which uses the words instrument or is when I see solvency application which makes the perm look like the plan. To use specificity is key or internal benefit is narrowing key. LOL Deeks and I should sure the 25 best is for the course to depend on fairness evidence and explanation or explain that put a concrete terms of warrant corrector with the nation claims in the absence of ex ante statutory we recognize the sensitivity of assessments of particular and abroad and now we're holding with a particular policy we would choose a latter independently rejected for vagueness the app doesn't specify which other issue do the plan over to the counterplan now do the counterplan severs because the counterplan does not do federal action and bans federal action in this area but an issue for ground federal can't mean states OED the United Political Union which is state from several state it's a single meaning federal only obligated not only the single process that's not their application as a list of the US and DC the single adopt the 50 states parole now the counterplan certainly solves international adherence modeling best international 25 no preface action close to the US convention international legal norms the comparable US section on Russia Central China the federal states have to comply with the international rules of the US on the Germany and Washington and accept the Stockholm Convention of the before ratification I held in New York and national legislation they put in the elimination of racial discrimination in the US and non-public in these participation between the US and foreign partners first move of the counterplan's first federal foreign law not the inverse or reverse the Deeks and Turner, 25 State, acting first members on the Fed Act, and you see the rules repeatedly similar for Fed action, the HR saying no silence, the student, and before Congress, in models offering 100%, doesn't conduct, the drop of and number of states, and Congress and alcohol, and push to the Congress, and exactly where they say lowest number of states, enacting some laws, good reason, the Department of the Fed, adoption, Group Wu and McQuaid doesn't assume Plank 2, which solves it. The theoretical deficit does not exist in practice. The counterparts mandate solves it within the same type of market at the sub-federal level. The states would uniformly determine the deposit refund scheme equally as the AF, but it proves competition and generates uniqueness. Says that CFTC would litigate. They can only do so through the courts and proves that there's a gap that exists now for the states to fail down. Cohen, we're straight turning the next deficit. It applies exclusively to the plan, not the counterplan. Territorial restrictions are resolved by uniform fee offsets. It's a non-issue when states work together. Knowledge and resources are wrong. The counterplan increases the resources directed to enforcement. That's normal means that the counterplan no incentive for big old to litigate because they want certainty in the industry. Insert USC in blue. Now that that benefit is dropped, no need to 1AR answers. Tracy concession shape block strategy, cohesive national and foreign security outweighs disengagement, ensures arsenal expansion in both regional adversaries Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, all expanded last shot. That's Rubini turns case isolationism, prompts partners to adapt the plan, undermines credibility in negotiations, and triggers hedging judicial rulings, narrow preemption. 30 of the grounds the courts would rule on would be based off the state's traditional responsibility to protect citizens, which is the basis for most state action vis-a-vis energy policy and national security. Insert Deeks for reference. Now theory, we get the counterpoints that feel both the states and federal government. Neg flex, the topic is huge, but the lower general ground outweighs off ground because they get case selected and speak lash, and there's no resolutional floor or functional limits forcing Fed key. No warrants testing governance is critical for policy design, artificially excluding real world processes that are evidence based and insulated from defending the core question of the topic. Reciprocity, they fiat the whole USFG, which is equally multi-actor and unrealistic because of multiple branches, and they clarify later on by proving that there's no link to politics, arbitrariness. You have voted on a QR that is down for both the states and an advantage counterplan there, and basically bans multiple counterplans, which is condo will be disproven below. The topic literature means is predictable and educational. The Hill 18, the research sub, they said action is expanding increases the number of platform emerging substate action has significant scope to grow at worst. Reject the argument, not the team. Condo is good. One, role coherence supreme. The counterplan doesn't the plans go. Just because predictability justifies such case. 2, negative ID flex rigorous setting which solves competitive equity and ideological education. Best side by some bad topics proves you should err negative. 3, risk averse force us to make our best arguments and gives the next fallback to encourage research. 4, no impact diminishing utility perm checks speed differences distance. T skew worse. 5, reject the arcs to their interpret not risk because it's substance crowd out reject dispo non ad hoc condo disguise no one agrees on. This is as a shift towards processing counterplans and plan spam to force perms next choice outweighs the advantage counterplan. The counterplan self-sufficiently further than that benefited outweigh at worst judge logical essential conditionality. It sends a massive signal to the globe that the U.S. is rebalancing attempts at global sustainable development and invests in international climate finance. It solves middle powers better because it increases defensive capabilities of regional powers to arm them against encroachment. That solves better than the plan because it's explicitly international in proclamation, whereas the plan is not perceived and clouded by external rhetoric. That's one is swage. Yes, solvency. Chen Yang is neg. It says other states trust adaptation funds more. The funds more, which the counterplan acts as better. Highlighting is Swiss cheese anyway. Also proves the state counterplan solves internationally. Insert USC in blue. Not perceiving fiat applies equally to the Dellinger deficit is not unique. They can't tax states that receive the revenue because that's not topical. IJ13, the United States, the continental U.S., Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, and Virgin Islands, diplomatic consular procedures not part of the U.S. Absent the counterplan, Trump's U.S. push terminally tubes the advantage U25 ceding the global leadership nothing. Kill trust like economy, put in front of the harmful elections that were allowed by the trust and property with the city countries, and some clear master unreliable the untrust around the world. We can stop hiring competing with China to do a recent increase out of global leadership. Do both links to the 1 hour, do the counterplan suburbs. Taking planks doesn't justify new answers. Tracy critical thinking solves doesn't increase growth, no warrant, purely relations building. The counterplan doesn't prevent financial crisis. Now, new plank, the United States federal government should pass the budget resolution. It's justified because 2 sees a constructive key to check add-ons. The advantage 1. There's zero chance they solve Trump freezing U.S. aid, Ukraine, and the overall office abandoning NATO, etc. all mean the signal of isolationism and non-support has been sent and overwhelms the plan. They don't perceive agencies as external from Trump because they think he's gutting everyone, proven by U.S. aid. It's not after uniqueness because they can't solve small state leadership fails. To bind states multilateral initiatives was 23 the participation of multiple states and mistake for giving the special right of public countries. Excelling the limitation response to state governance or manifest groups held to state different state and countries to visit lower state group really bonds the small. The group governance excludes them about how the rules will affect all countries. The rules 7 days with a little attention. The countries other than a small group who measure the process resulting in a deal that is mapped countries who suffer with the coalition that will circulating larger buy-in that presents what makes multilateral owners if not constant engaging can be have the limitation smaller groups limitation comes to the fore when they define rules for other countries. There has been some interest considered. I have no clue what the scenario for escalation is. We didn't concede the impacts because the impacts themselves do not exist in the 1AC. There have just lists random regions like the Caucasus who have no allies for drawing nor nukes, but I'll answer each list a scenario here. No Russian escalation. They're going to delete Ukraine after US pass withdraw
withdrawal truly can engage in another war. No Middle East, no escalation or withdrawal Carmel. No 20 at all 24 the base from another weather. No escalating company is well responsible because of the particularly likely cities or nuclear settlement. Here is one around locked ones that are suffered by the other country, the desert. No distance a little bit of exchange around open to be cautious of Egypt. No, they have little interest in conflict Syria. They sound the economic collapse of what the Gulf states with the US. No, put boots on the ground. No SCS war, GR23. The SCS is not a flash one. It is less proximate design engaged in interest of great powers of the countries. So they beat the China to the Philippines region agreement to escalate tension between the US and China. US presently oppose the use of force by unlikely to use that to escalate Asian tension, not about other issues. US must work with the EU to stop Iran and North West remain. Urgent mark the card. Urgent no cancel disease. The RFK means no cooperation. Cooperation does not solve. They don't have an internal link to it. No terminal to inequality. It's increasing now because of Trump's tariffs.
Good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I want to start on the deficit for the process counterplan. The
Which
Cohen,
one?
The first counterplan, the Cohen card. You answered it by saying the counterplan includes resources and normal means. As normal means, like what part of the text, what part of the emphasis, like we're just like asserting things.
No, it's your card is status quo descriptive. It says that states currently do not have
Yeah,
the
well,
funds
part of the
necessary. It
counterplan
says that
text
currently
said
the allocation
Yeah. I
put
understand
towards
that
these
currently
regimes.
the counterplan fails, and you said you include resources in the counterplan text, but I don't see it in there. So what part of the counterplan adds new resources, enforcement capability, etc. to solve this deficit?
You've made arguments for normal means, solvency for the plan, like things like third-party organizations
Nope,
doing
that's a status quo.
tracking.
We don't fiat that.
Those aren't
that would
fiat-
be topical.
What?
So we don't fiat that. That's how the world works.
Yeah, that's
Well,
that is our argument. Like that is when states would work together. When states pursue an initiative, they pour more money into it.
Your
Your
answer
card
to
is status quo descriptive. It says that currently they do not have the money invested, which the counterplan
Okay,
obviously
I
solves
wanna
because it
talk-
gives them more money.
Okay, I want to talk
And the
about.
money required is
Can I
also
move on,
provided
please?
off the scheme.
Can I
Yeah,
take-
sorry.
I
yeah.
want to move on to competition. The answer to perm to the plan is the outcome. The only thing I have flows is it adds time frame, which is intrinsic. Was there like a reason that is bad?
Why intrinsicness is bad?
I mean, sure. Which
Yes,
is, like,
it was on
for,
the-
for other issues. So I missed the first one of
Yes.
that. What was it?
What was what?
The number one subpoint on that.
On other issues?
Yeah.
Ground. Internal net benefits get erased because they're the only way to produce offense in this topic when uniqueness is shoddy all the time.
Okay. What's your interpretation for competition? Like, what is the negative burden? Cash bond and the twins.
Counterplans must be functionally competitive, or even if they must
Just
be textually and functionally competitive, terms that are functionally intrinsic are not legit.
Wait.
I don't understand-
So,
wait,
so what
actually-
is this interpretation? Just functional competition, or functional and textual, but
No,
yet
no,
doesn't
like,
get terms?
I'm saying one, like counterplans must be functionally competitive,
Okay.
but two, even if counterplans must be textually and functionally competitive, perms must be both functionally and textually legit. I don't think we have to win that. Yeah, counterplans must be functionally competitive. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about. Actually, that's fine. The warrants were due both. What is the impact on any of them? Like gap filling, the counterplan is only in the absence of the plan. Like so.
What do you mean so?
Like,
We've
what
read
is
a
the
net
impact?
benefit that says gap filling is key to revitalize entrepreneurial federalism, which solves national security concerns
Okay.
and produces
Given
productive
you also
friction
read a card that
executive
follow-on would
decision-making.
occur, how do you not like? How does that not trigger the net benefit?
Because that is the Fed doing it after the states have filled the gap.
So if the Fed does it after it solves the net benefit, and doesn't
No, no,
do
no,
any of the
no,
due
no, no,
answers?
no.
So then why the hell doesn't you link to the follow-on argument? Like,
What do you mean?
well, you said follow-on, and then you also said
Yeah.
that if the federal government does it after, follows on.
Yeah,
and
the
it links
gap
to
needs to
net benefit.
exist. If the plan is included, the gap does not exist.
What is the difference between that and follow-on?
What do you mean?
What? Oh my god. Okay. Sure.
You'll learn to prep, right? 640.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, 630. Sending. Sent. Oh, where's the stand?
To be clear, the new link you read was exactly as it was in the doc, right? There wasn't like.
My eyes or something wrong.
Yeah. No.
No, I just like didn't flood it, and I wanted to make sure I had the right text for the counterplan.
I forgot to hit send. I just sent. It's politics, critique, the finance advantage. Whatever has it.
Just need to get it open.
Yep, no worries. Good. Okay. Good. Cool.
Politics can see the Reigns Act is not part of the bill. Budget resolution won't pass, and the plan is CFTC, which shields link, takes out any risk of offense not going for it. Also, the counterplan that gets rid of it. But terminals are dropped. Another impact for TDEP. Drop pandemics are existential because there's upcoming ones that are really contagious, harm reproduction, and zoonotic ones which harm judicial safeguards and when guarding only downturn solves by collapsing the admin state, makes pandemic response impossible because the CDC is developing faulty test procedures now, discouraging preventatory pandemic spread measures, and the FDA isn't allowing for testing of vaccines as one hard observed evidence plan solves was invented in cross-sex, not a carded argument. So I certainly do not want to hear the one or say anything about it because it's not justified. The green populism conceive the permutation testing competition theories a reason to reject the argument, not the team. Anything else causes substance crowd out, and it's justified with conditionality because it's key for night flex. Things that are cross-applicable as sustainability cards, which are answered below. But Barkdale and Harris is better, improves climate, is another existential impact with no defense because of tipping points and global effects that only downturn can solve. Our card's second line's their card, and another defense assumes inequality and lack of political will, which constitute hard limits to adaptation. Their Albert card, and the other one is aspirational about what a best case capitalism would cause, which is not likely in the status quo. Our card's second line says that's not coming. Only large socioeconomic changes solve, which DDEV is. DDEV continue the first advantage to continue growth is never, or the second one, or second. Continued growth is never existential. Insurers will hit warmings and rapidly encroaching tipping points past thermodynamic limits and face heat death and use resources. And as ever continues to including biodiversity, nitrogen, and phosphorus. It's all steward thermodynamics, and all those minerals were dropped in the 1 and 2, so the 1 should not get read cards about growth-oriented AI ensures extinction with degrowth cells. Fine. Puyo and 18 child sustainability supercharged content. Independent supercharged can ensure be affected by the socioeconomic context which develops new levels of major force shaping character politics and sharp strategy growth. Superintelligence aligning with capitalist markets can have a style of concept of human and whole bias for new levels. This grid is very special. Be around for superintelligent global policy, the actively transfer decision markets and automated governance of foundational tenant goals are partly shaped by firms themselves. Growth is not thought to rely on earnings. Therefore, economic selection can be expected to favor firms which there are greater AI. So, technical constraints are overcome by asymptotically advanced technology with extreme AI level extreme technological development across also another fields of seniors not defined by some contingent choice of AI's global programs. The goal is to emerge from large set and subject to capitalist rule of interaction and natural selection. And tech, send this out after tours in 23. It'll turn extension to the rest foreground. Dangerous posed by non-state actors, dual use emerging tech becoming more powerful, accessible, synth bio, minimize relevance of knowledge and nanofactories and power groups with a few resources, AI, hack, and a nuclear launch system, small number of military industrial entities might profit mode of developing technologies. The aim should be to address root cause of military industrial complex green tech 2EC1. They say no zero link. This is incoherent. The second advantage says financial stability exists now in the BCM market, and that causes a financial crash that's never been seen before in history. We conceded that. It says downturns aren't essential, which we done below. So this is just another transition fails. Argument the transition is successful. Joneses societies are globally interconnected to an economic recession in the U.S. spreads globally, but it wouldn't be existential because there are many pockets of society would exist which would allow us for reverse civilization, will progress via decreased energy use and resource use within a year. We don't need to win this global because the 2EC cross-sex setup that it is. Nuclear war won't cause extinction, but reverse development in industrial society back 10-15. Extinction may be extremely unlikely. 100 plus. Isolated people survive. There will be substantial food reserves and animals hunted enough to survive. Some civilizations survive, but unable to sign modern energy trade and force retrace development. Nuclear war would have a hard time destroying population outright. Force a transition bomb. 18 transition can be transportation may disrupt breakdown could result in economic general function. Reduced emissions could be quite significant for nuclear war transport. Cause 60% energy disruption could cause very large reduction in energy costs. 35% emissions impacts could be long lasting and changes linger even after supplies are restored. 2EC2 war nearly says all claims no warrants cross exposed stewards proves financial crises do solve past financial downturns with the only time emissions have empirically decreased, but that isn't done because they've said this one far exceeds those in scale. 08 and stuff proves 2EC3 they say Hickle only arg is degrowth harms renewable deployment dropped several warrants from Stewart, which answered it because the degrowth is not renewables age. Vaughn's paradox. The plan making technology more efficient only increases emissions because energy expansion increases supply will spur corresponding demand. B. Renewables fail. They require increased REM and extraction and land use, which alone drives emissions due to their lower EROI. The energy required for green energy transition will cause impacts cause at all. In 22, constructing low carbon energy system will require energy derived from fossil fuels, which transition may consume. The energy available in society be a source of emissions. The share of carbon associated are substantial, will increase and take up all money. Emissions available in society. Renewables have a lower EROI compared to the current system. Lower EROI implies less delivered relative to energy required to supply the energy required for the transition. Might also push energy into emissions tab 2C4. They say populism. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Growth is the root cause for Agenda 22. Democratic governments are wholly captured by oligarchic corporation powers being called by neoliberal rationalities that valorize efficiency, maximization of human capital, which forecloses both social and environmental legislation. What governs our democracy is neoliberalism. Capitalism harbors contradicting the decline of political crisis. Economy has conditioned the possibility of geopolitical deployment military to foster accumulation, exploitation, exchange of economy stands in relation with imperative accumulation mark and imperative of accumulation. They say Lawrence polycrisis solved. There's no unique internal to this. Below says below will prove growth harms cooperation. And do you have that too?
Which one?
The polycrisis thing. The Albert card.
Oh, yeah.
286, they say Bohemian not going for this card anymore, but it's not net offense for them because it just says that it's not true for some countries, but growth does cause conflict. Schneider 22 constitute a feature of capitalism, oscillation between boom bust, capitalist peace, always threaten austerity, increase social tension, growing evidence. Economic freedom not working periods of contradiction makes capitalist peace unstable with every new recession. Intensive struggles occur, capitalist government able to buy more security through arms and periods of expansion create risk of arms which destabilize balance of power over accumulation requires valid input, turns prolific and alliances. And economic decline does not cause war. That's Walt in 20. I do not think econ impact war if depression is a cause of war. There will be more. The U.S. suffered 40 yet. 20 wars most unmotivated econ national leaders avoid war when uncertain, no matter a condition, his leaders will not go unless cheaply with success, motivation, and security not gain. Every war started from not conquest, oppression. No other one factor among many, and really the most significant economy is not likely. The effect probability dropped. The 2AC dropped the responses to their cars. Junk. Why Chart is a joke. It's about misinformation, and Junk is about slow growth and autocracies, which they haven't said any. None of it. The plan spills over to any of them. Recessions, moderate war. Lie 19. The relationship between religions and the wars are divided in 4 stages. Wars can occur at any expansion, no crisis, recovery, and source of administration. More can educate the resource for foreigners are huge for depression. Resource outbreaks all stages. Origins, downward pressure, which exists during recession or prosperity. Wars occur in opportunity which cause opportunity to prevail. Last thing is, I don't do this. Where's the decoupling stuff? No decoupling, Peric at 21 decoupling. Your rates are minuscule, stress at times 3 times larger, smaller than necessary to be 1.5 degrees Celsius, fall along the shore of, and slow down after 24. We need all countries to match. Triple these record rates between 26 and 29. 1/3 what is the need to have support every mission 150 others and not global actually growing high because GDP growth small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My card just add minor like the populism plus recoupling.
Sending the tech impact card.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna want to like put those two. Into
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah.
Boy, oh boy. How about that economy, huh?
How about it?
Okay, wait, I just got raised down.
Oh, give me 1 sec.
Hey, I take your time.
Okay, this one's done.
Wait, oh, this one, it's like long. Okay. Wait, and this was marked presumably where the like couple of paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, this card is like the longest card. Okay, and then recoupling.
Peric was marked at how big was
Small.
GDP growth? Small. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other, like
Torres
they
was sent.
actually-
Yeah.
Hold on, downloading Torres. I mean, everybody knows Torres. Let me copy paste that. Okay, technology, copy paste. 205.
I'm sad. It was too close to the dock, so my computer doesn't explode. Round 6, not round 3. Okay.
Two times that.
Yeah. The order will be. Is everyone good for order?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Offsets,
Mm-hmm.
finance, damage counter plan, cheating counter plan. Was that a nod like an agreement or just a ready?
No, I got the,
Okay.
yeah.
As in we're all on the same page about what we're referring to. Yeah.
Which one's the last one?
Yeah.
The states.
Everyone knew what it was.
Yeah, the
so-
one that's
I don't know.
just the
I got my
state.
Bottles and floor right here.
Yeah.
I got the. Let me just open it.
Preemption.
They're all cheap.
That's what we like to hear. That's what we like to hear.
I got my plant favorite here.
Okay, I'm good. Ray, you're good.
Wait, what was the order?
Offsets, finance, advantage, cheating.
Give me a second, get my cursor. Yep.
Offsets, we can see the plan's insufficient to resolve the plan is insufficient to corral middle powers. We're not going for the advantage, which means that the advantage counterplan is largely irrelevant since the Trinity didn't extend the plan that solved finance, and even if it did, none of their cards talk about the risk that subprime carbon poses. Just a finance bank run, which is not specific to our internal link, but none of their impact events cards applied. No Russian escalation was an uncarded assertion, and none of their internal link cards assume our collapse internal link. The two E's, the two and R just now get to cross these cards or reapply them to the econ scenario because they were not done so in the 2 and C, but finance advantage. Existential polycrisis guarantees extinction and access to the fastest internal link to all next scenarios, overlapping structural issues with economics, political polarization, environmental crisis and disease, overwhelming response capacity, which guarantees systemic collapse, which is Lawrence. They've only read recession defense, but they've never read defense that assumes the unique element of a polycrisis where there's political, economic, and social turmoil in all facets of the government, which includes misinformation, which means a recutting of Wishart is entirely irrelevant, and you should only assume that the app has a terminal impact that encompasses the entirety of the debate. But yes, diversion, there wrongly selects only absolute economic decline as a trigger, and only short-term military action is conflict, correcting the encompass relative decline, and longer-term cycles of escalation like weaponization of asymmetric trade explains contradictory studies, which is the young evidence, especially Trump's treat, and seeks to avoid part of by China extension nuclear war stand-up could increase the possibility of a diversion war has full authority to launch the U.S. war plan of unleash a cost combating factor global state rather than deterrence being about mad military planners also meant preventing from other nations from taking course of action inimical to U.S. introduced crisis shock to place with five powerful tools including nuclear weapons to attempt to resist when figuring out how to respond to widespread war and unrest. Now the impact run is largely irrelevant. The other countries solve evil AI. They have not won the DDEV is global, so they can check it. But profit motive exists now, and their tours and Puyo impacts haven't happened yet. And Wishart turns it via collaboration, which growth is key to, which means we have internal link to both of the scenarios, and they don't have a reason why the transition would scale down it fast enough to resolve their impact. But yes, nuclear war extinction. Dennis, Pamela, and Armstrong, and 15 potential for deliberate accidental nuclear conflict has been removed. With some estimates put the risk of war in the next century around 10% destruction and death of major cities around the world. To explosive fallout nuclear, which would plunge temperatures full of freezing us to destroy us, and later research severe models confirm. Analysis even as well nuclear conflict trigger nuclear winter disintegration, food supply, masturbation, state collapse, extinction is possible, where recovery becomes impossible, humanity succumbs to other risks such as pandemics. Walt is AF, Walt in 20. If one takes a long-term perspective, sustained depression can make war likely, strengthening fascist movements, fueling protections have been hybridized, making it more difficult for countries to reach. Marks the 1930s shows where such trends lead economic misery can intensify these trends and leave us in a more prone economy. Now they say that crisis is key to transition. Financial crisis leads to wide-ranging populism. They fundamentally mishandle the virtue of dissent. Reading a card that says growth is the root cause of it does not necessarily mean that you have answered our argument, but reject any of about generic town charts, and disproves funk and Trebek and 17 financial crisis, many catalysts of growing populist politics in Italy, Germany, Northern region, other Finnish press, right financial crisis, leading extremist politics, where others downturns, and not financial crisis, and inexcusable failure policies rather than an external shock that leads to destruction, politics, financial crisis, trigger inequality to levels not in normal recessions, often involve bailouts, and these are controversial and give attraction to extremist ideas in this environment, right populist gain vote by attributing gain to minorities or foreigners. Now, the sustainability debate, it's irrelevant. One, it begs the question of solvency. Our impact is the crunch from unsustainable growth. Only reforms to neoliberal governance have any chance of solving inevitable contradictions between growth and the environment, which is Lawrence and Cornelius. Two, decoupling is feasible, reducing externalities is a normal condition under capitalism. Zero degrowth dollars think decoupling is impossible, only difficult. It's comparatively more likely than all other countries embracing degrowth. The one in our shotgun warrants and did not explain why they didn't scale up and did not enter Cornelius in depth. Now, the transition rate is where you will hang your hat. It's try to smooth the next transition. We internally entered it in the TUIC in the block read 0 new cards, only vague explanations of the word salad from the Jones evidence. It does not facilitate their transition. One, resistance from corporations and institutional block and backlash absent transition investor alignment at the escalating public crisis and triggering every one of their collapse inevitable scenarios, which is Lawrence and Bertram. Two, recession, internally turned transition. It kills socially important sectors and focuses on restarting growth with no care for environmental costs, which makes the plan a sequencing question, which is the Hickel evidence. Javans and renewables can be entirely correct, but there's no real articulation of how the plan or how the transition achieves a scale down of rapid emissions without doing renewables, and they don't have any explanation. Three, energy transition is investments key to the scale necessary to support solvent degrowth, otherwise amounts to desocialization and mass king and 24 without actually degrowth occur the form of market control collapse as a result of public crisis. If degrowth were to happen rather than being a choice, no chance of settling into a state in which modernity will persist, organized societies and knowledge accumulation over a large scale of renewables, energy-based system that necessity to achieve degree of more stable and yes, decoupling Leonard and 22 cutting emissions boils out of degrowth or decoupling degrowth impulsive large and certain as green growth tech breakthroughs to proven alarmist records from Malthus to Ehrlich tech will be needed to reduce emissions for society to revert to less emission tech offsetting savings instead of machines spurred solar and wind making them cost competitive achieve absolute decoupling even accounting for emissions abroad massive investment will be needed. It's difficult to see how economies over time smaller can generate this alongside education, health, or adaptation to the private sector will have to mobilize undermining financial stability or hardly sense like a way to make that happen. Now the advantage counterplan is largely irrelevant. Their definition had no standards and they didn't read it wasn't a reason to reject the team in the block, and we already answered why it doesn't solve the other advantage on the advantage. Now the preemptive counterplan extend perm to the plan as the outcome. It solves 100% in the net benefit. They read a card about follow-on and that said it doesn't link to the net benefit or trigger the perm do both deficits, and this perm is exactly federal follow-on. Perms only need to be textually or functionally legitimate because counterplans need to be both. That's best for fairness and clash. Text only justifies word picks that shift the debate from questions of desirability to semantics. It's unpredictable and educational. Function only justifies normal means picks that steal the app and create shallow plan debates. The truancy did not contain an interpretive cross-sex and had no defense of it in the speech, so you should err heavily affirmative. The truancy didn't say the perm severed, only said it at a delay. That is wrong. The counterplan includes a time frame element in this process because first states have to act and then the federal government needs to say that was legally permissible. The text has it in that order for a reason, and all of their evidence assumes it to be true, or else the preemptive benefit would be coherent. I'll answer their standards. One, ground, conceded functional limits on T, and there are only two MBS which solve. Pledge Trumper cuts both ways, and concede condo is key to neck flex. Two, we don't allow scramble perms, only removing words from the counterplan. Three, the perm is more real world and educational, plus the counterplan is uncertain.
Okay. How much do we end up having? 628?
640.
640. Okay, got it.
I had 6:30 because you took a bit of prep before the one hour.
Okay, that's why.
Oh,
that's
you're
why
right,
it was
you're
different.
right.
Okay, 628 starting.
the state's counterplan. Let me get some water. So I'm trying to set up my flow next to it, but it's not like maybe if I do it on this end. Yeah. And up there. Okay. Anyone not ready?
We have a conceded fiat and NDT that turns case means any mitigation via the counterclass solvency or case defense negates means they're only out as a permutation, but we have substantial deficits to it, and that the 1AR does not grapple with. The counterplan has the states do the plan, and the courts rule it legally permissible in the absence of federal action that narrows the preemption doctrine to exclusively conflict preemption that establishes entrepreneurial federalism and allows the states to take national security initiatives, filling in for federal inefficiencies, and produces productive fiction with federal policymaking to enhance broader governmental decision-making in national security that prevents hostile escalation of host theaters, including the Middle East, Asia, Europe, etc., and revitalize their security guarantees to prevent existential arms racing and cyber warfare that seeks. And Rubini, only the substantive argument in the 1AR was uncertainty after the timer went off. It was not in the 2AC, it was just asserted at the end of the 1AR. No warrants, it wasn't tied to anyone to see the impacts of the 2AR. It's just too late for it. They've dropped the counterplan that is perceived better by international actors. It's akin to the federal regulation, so it solves mechanistically. They have no reason why states doing it is insufficient and substantial impact defense to case below. Now, MSU picked the wrong permutation. It's functionally and textually intrinsic. First, textually, it adds a plus that's not present in the counterplan nor the plan. They should be punished for not writing their text more carefully. B subpoint is functionally it adds an element of sequencing. No, the counterplan does not include an element of time frame. The way you should understand this is whether or not the counterplan will cohere if you switch the order of the planks. The judicial ruling happens simultaneously with the states. The reason you know this is true is because if you fiat the second plank of the counterplan, i.e. the judiciary ruling illegally permissible, and then the states doing it, the counterplan would still cohere and solve. So you know the time frame is not an element that the counterplan introduces because the judicial ruling is not dependent on the states doing it first or any sort of reaction therein. Regardless, even if they're right, the only area it adds time frame potentially would be between the states and the ruling. The permutation adds an element of time frame after the ruling, which is not present in the counterplan. They can't move it around. That makes no sense. There's no 1AR justification for that, and proves all our abuse offense below. We don't have to win functional competition because the counterplan competes both functionally and textually. It does not have the federal government do the plan. The permutation. There's also large deficits to it. The permutation fails. Productive friction is key. The plan. The permutation is perceived as the Fed the Fed doing it almost instantly after the counterplan happens, not leaving any time for productive friction to occur. The productive friction to occur to enhance executive decision making and national security. Broadly, it's perceived akin to do both because it has the federal government do the plan without learning from the states first and engaging states in national security, or in energy policy decision making, which hurts broader national security. The national security initiatives. Now, counterplans must only be functionally competitive.
I sent you it.
Yeah, okay. One is perm gaming. Textual competition results in unpredictable outcomes. Sentences can be spliced together to create an endless arsenal of perm text to solve any disadvantage. For example, consider an advantage counterplan which funds international climate resilience and then enacts a nuclear no first use policy and gets permed as fund nuclear weapons to solve the impact to every disad. There's no end to creativity. There's no end to creativity. Not going to give more examples. Yes, scramble perms. The 1AR argument does not make sense. They said that you can move the words around, which is our argument. Planks. The moving words between planks has no bounds because planks themselves are arbitrary. You can put them as sentences. There's no distinction between any of these. So yes, we have a link to perm gaming that erases neg any neg offense, even if the win half ground outweighs in some defense to neg deflects. The scope of our internal link is simply greater. Second is ground. What they're calling non-germane net benefits is the only reliable net ground on this topic. Uniqueness only goes neg. Half ground is high, net ground is low. The literature is broadly affluent. There's no resolution for because things like T decarbonization, T clean energy policy mixes burdens and lack net and or meaningless. There are no disads beside made up ones like politics, which passed yesterday and
but are even more educational because they're blatantly untrue. All that disproves functional limits. Condo is insufficient because we need something to read first in order to explicate it. All dissat links are low because Biden nuked link uniqueness. Terms like these are disastrous for every critical piece of net ground on this topic because they could do like plan plus plan after the advantage counterplan to solve the link to any politics to politics data, or plan after advantage counterplan to solve the internal link to Vision 2030 by saying the plan would happen after Vision 2030. This is especially true when the 1AR does not specify the time frame upon which the plan happens, and also proves our deficits above dropped, especially at the NDT. You should hold the line to preserve net ground and prevent an explosion of new apps.
Did you say new apps? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, cool.
Yeah, real world doesn't matter. Fairness outweighs. Reading a book solves. We have a larger internal link to it.
You said all the top stuff.
Yeah.
Just read the
what do you
stuff.
want me to say?
Certain
Okay.
to it.
Huh?
Certain to say that and that.
Which this?
This first.
Oh, drop the internal net benefits of the deficit to the counterplan can outweigh. Uncertainty was new in the 1AR, not asserted. No warrant should not be expected to rejoin it. Yeah, cool. Case. No econ decline impact. It wasn't tied to a certainty deficit in the 1AR, so we shouldn't have to answer. But growth is not statistically correlated with P. Drop one cause on DDEV. Boom and bust economies means interdependence does not work as a deterrent for conflict during contractions, and empirically is correlated with austerity cuts, which increases social tensions. Capitalist governments invest more in their military during periods of expansion. Empirical studies have found that wars actually increase during times of prosperity due to over-optimism. That's Warren Schneider citing a consensus of studies against economic independence theory and Lau. The 1AR didn't answer any of them, just extend their stuff, so the QR shouldn't get to say new things. I'm honestly not even sure what the implication of like counterplan must be functionally competitive is. At the end of the day, like the perm is functionally intrinsic because it adds an element of delay that and textually intrinsic, and that deletes net ground. I don't understand why we have to win the counterplan is textually or functionally competitive.
205.
All good.
Apparently we're live streaming. I forgot about that.
Case, then counterplan. Okay, we're good. Wait. to say. All three. Sweet. It's a bit odd, but I think the 2NR accidentally double-turned itself. They went for a counterplan that solves 100% of the F, and then said that growth causes war. It means at least there's zero risk of a net benefit because it causes and both solves war. I don't understand what the bottom of the 2NR was doing. It was not defense because they extended the Liao card, which explicitly says that increasing growth solves conflict. If it's true, the affirmative solves growth, so does the counterplan. And the 2NR just kind of like wrecked it. I don't understand what this means, but you can vote F on presumption because voting for the counterplan is a world where there is extremely certainly guaranteed to be war. But voting affirmative has some risk of avoiding that, and presumption flips affirmative when they went for a counterplan. The counterplan proper. I'm going for perm to the plan as the outcome of the counterplan. It solves 100% of the net benefit because they had read a card about federal follow-on being legitimate, and the perm is just federal follow-on because the plan is sequentially last. I cross-exed on this for a reason, and it was explicit in the 1AR. They said that federal follow-on does not link to the reason that perm do both fails because it happens sequentially after. The same is true of the permutation. I spent 1AR and cross-ex time on this for a reason. It means that their cross-applications and deficits do not apply because they have said that when the federal government does the plan after as federal follow-on, it does not link to any deficits because it is sequentially later, so there's no perception of the federal government getting involved too soon or causing any problems. This was an argument that they made that we strategically conceded, so there cannot be a deficit to the permutation. If you somehow conclude that there is a deficit permutation, then you should also vote F on presumption because they said the counterplan causes federal follow, which means the counterplan then just links back to itself because it causes follow-on, which means it looks like perm to both and causes all of the perception of the federal friction stuff that they were complaining about. Now, the permutation is certainly legitimate. The 2NC was extremely light on the released permutation and did not contain an interpretation of competition until I asked for one in cross-sex, so you should be relatively lenient on the 2AR for having any new explanation, but it will not be new because they sandbagged competition and made new arguments in the 2NR, like arguments about why the topic is bad or about topicality, which means my answers are justified. The framing issue for competition, ask yourself if the world you want to live in is one where your NDT prep is Google searches like random legal word within 5 decarbonization, within 100 nuclear war. If you think that 1 NC is that fiat states doing illegal things, and then the federal government just giving it a big old thumbs up are the way to learn about the topic, and having debates that are breadth that do not rely on hypergeneric garbage and actually engage with each other, then you should vote affirmative for the permutation. Our interpretation is that perms need to be textually or functionally competitive, and counterplans need to be both textually and functionally competitive. That is best for fairness and clash and to preserve a model of debate that is valuable for anybody participating. Functional only competition justifies normal mean picks that steal the app with unpredictable literature about legal minutia and do not engage with the topic. They are not about the resolution, so the affirmative can never prepare in advance. It's used the literature because there are not arguments about these mechanisms and the plan, so we all rely on evidence. It's just close enough, but not actually about the debate. And also, our model also solves for textual only competition. Those cause terrible word picks that mean the affirmative loses to things like semantic differences. All of this was explained in the 1AR, and the 2NR contains zero defense to our standards about the world that we would live in if functional only or textual only competition was legitimate. It wrecks both sides. On the affirmative, it means we never get deep in any literature or any strategic preparation, and we don't learn about the affirmative or its desirability because all we care about is a good enough deficit and making sure we don't put any words that can get picked out of it. Also wrecks the negative. There's no incentive to get a topic dised. If all you need to do is almost fiat the affirmative or fiat out of create some illegal thing and then fiat out of it, it is barely that is barely relevant to the topic. Now, I do not need to win any of the competition debate if I just win that the perm is not intrinsic. Remember, they have never defined a word, so there's no topical burden of anything. There is no even definition that they provided of what it means to be intrinsic because they've not defined something like should to be immediate. Even then, USC's counterplan certainly has delay in it. This was clearly extended in the 1AR. If states do the plan and then the government says it was legally permissible, nothing else could ever make sense. Why would the federal government answer a legal mandate before the question is even raised? How would they know what the case was about? What would be the test case? The test case is the first plank, so their rant about switching the order of the planks makes no sense because the federal government could never rule that something was legally permissible when that had not happened yet. There's a reason they put the planks in the order that they did, and the 2NC assertion that the 2NR assertion that they could switch them is irrelevant because if that was the case, they should have done it in the other order. Their evidence also clearly assumes the states go first. Their arguments about preemption and friction are all the argument that states should go first and then the federal government should act. Otherwise, there would be no net benefit about the states filling gaps for the federal government or the courts ruling on preemption to expand states' authority. All other evidence assumes this, and so preemption could never exist, and otherwise there would be no net benefit. Now, the next argument that they made was that answers all this stuff about switching and flipping the planks independent. The next argument they made was about adding where the time frame occurs with like state versus ruling, and then after the ruling, that is irrelevant because the fact that there is time frame means we get to move it around. There's no argument about why that particularly links to any of their offense. So even if it's true, it's just kind of a nice FYI, but not related to any part of the debate about competition. The next argument was perm fails because of do both. I did that already at the top. Now the only functional argument. So first answer was perm gaming. There are a couple answers. One, we said that our interpretation does not allow scrambling, only deleting words, which solves most of their offense. But the community norms will check against counterparts like fun nukes because that is clearly functionally intrinsic. It adds something that neither the counterplan nor the plan did, and no one of the counterplan does that. Plus, the negative could read into NC plays or amend their counterplan like they did in this debate. Their second argument was ground. Now they've conceded that there are only 2 MBIs, and the list of functional limits from topicality would demonstrate that there is no offense here, even if the argument about the Trumper cuts both ways and Biden like uniqueness is solved by Trump because he's never going to do any climate pledge. Now the argument was that politics is past is dumb. The evidence, this is functional limits are great and solve their offense. States kills against any made-up preemptiveness, and the CAPK and econ double mind is incredible. Trump is pro fossil fuels, which solves all their offense. Argument about it, especially at the NDT, goes affirmative. We should be having debates about the topic at the most important tournament of the year, not debates about fiating illegal things and then pretending it was all okay, especially when their evidence is probably an advocate for the perm.
The debate.
And then card doc is being sent. You need it. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, there's not really any AF cards that I would be interested in, right?
I would be interested in your perm text, but
Oh, yeah, I'll send it.
can you throw the plan in there too?
And the plan you said? Yeah, sorry. I'll get those.
Just put that down.
I'm just gonna send it with some email. I mean, there's no reason.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay, the text has been sent.
You two, I'm the account for the time if you want me to upload your wiki for me. Or do
Yeah,
you
the
want to
one
upload
in
it?
C,
The one in C? Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
I got it. No worries.
put that there?
No, I didn't mean it. Sorry. Yes.
No. Steve, you stay there. I was talking with her about this, that's not what's started. I had no idea you were doing like sites or whatever.
No, I just finished that, and I wanted to go walk around there.
Yeah,
because
okay.
my legs are fine.
Do you want to?
I think someone should stay.
Oh, no, that's fine. Okay. Let's do it.
Okay, I'll be back.
Let me afraid to call. Oh yeah. Is he outside?
Everyone good? Alright, congratulations to both teams. Truly a fantastic debate. Maybe the best competition debate I've ever seen in some ways. 2-1 for the app from Michigan State. I voted nay. Double turn, yes, no, no. Growth causes some wars, not equal. Growth causes all wars. So there can still be more wars under your app. Per. So text function, not relevant because you dropped that you added a plus, which is textually intrinsic, which is stupid, but whatever.
You knew what the two error? I know what the two error didn't say that. Does that, are you on the?
Potentially.
Sure.
But anyway. And then the functional legitimacy question. So there's two questions that are relevant to functional legitimacy. One is, does the counterplan alone include sequencing? And the other one is, does the placement of the sequencing, is that part of the counterplan's functions? I ended up concluding that the counterplan alone does not include sequencing, and therefore I thought that U permuting sequencing was illegitimate. The way that I'm instructed to evaluate this by the 2NR is, if the planks get moved around, would it still cohere? This is a premise that you seem to accept as like a framing device for whether I should evaluate this. So, would it cohere if I rearranged the counterplan text? I think that it would. The neg smartly wrote plank 2 to say that the judiciary rules on, quote, states adopting a deposit refund instrument for carbon reversal, blah, 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 rather than just cross-referencing the other plank. The reason that I think that that's important is, like, you're making a variety of reasonable arguments for why the way that the counterplan would occur if you flipped the order of the planks in time would not be a very natural way for the counterplan to occur. Like, it is certainly true that it is most common for courts to make decisions with reference to particular policy options. And like, certainly as I'm reading the counterplan text, I am thinking to myself that like, probably they are sequencing, like the actions would be sequenced in the way that they are describing. But I don't think that it would be incoherent if they flipped the sequence of the planks. Courts could, in theory, make a ruling with respect to nothing in particular about what behavior would be permissible. This is something that in debate we imagine judicial actors doing all the time, even if it's not real world. The 2NR even has a separate section in a different, like in another part of the debate where they're like real world doesn't matter because like go read a book or something. So there's that component. And the way that I'm thinking about this, given the 2NR instructions, is essentially that you've made a bunch of normal means arguments for how, given the variety of those, like given the reality of those institutional mechanisms, here's how the sequencing would likely occur. But that distinction is important for whether you can permute it or not, because if the sequencing question of the planks is merely a question of normal means, then that is not something that they fiat, so that would be intrinsic for you to permute, because that is not a fiat mandate that is included in the counterplan text. So, you know, even if, like, if that sequencing question is decided in that way, that means that there is no sequencing for you to permute, and that means that that is an additional element that the permutation would have to add that is not legitimate. You also say that I should read into the fact that the neg sequenced the planks in the way that they did, rather than sequencing it hypothetically the other way, like counterfactually what would happen if they had written the counterplan text the other way. But I kind of think that this is the same question as what I was just describing. So like, just like the reason that they, to me, their thought experiment of like, imagine the planks flipped the other direction, would that still be coherent and would that still work as a counterplan, speaks to the reality that because English is sequentially written, there has to have been some sequencing of the sentences in the counterplan text. And to analyze whether or not the sequencing of the sentences in the counterplan text speaks to a sequencing of functions in time, I should flip the order of the two planks and then think about whether that would alter the functions. So that just feeds back into the stuff that I was describing earlier. So like, basically, you're like, they must have sequenced it this way because that must be meaningful. And like, given that, I think that it would still work if you flip them in the opposite direction. I don't actually think that it is meaningful that they sequenced it in this way. So, no sequencing function in the counterplan for you to permute means that it is intrinsic. I will, like, that is where I stopped because that, like, was sufficient for me to determine, like, all the important parts of the debate. I will say I started thinking a little bit about whether the perm solves. I will say it would have been very difficult for me to decide the debate based on the other components of the debate without intervening. I think there would be literally no way for me to decide without intervening about the placement of the sequencing, because you all just asserted the stuff in the opposite directions. Like, you said it doesn't make sense, you said it does make sense, and like, there's some follow-up that could have happened, but like, there would be literally no way for me to decide that question without intervening on one side or the other. And as for whether the perm links to the net benefit or not, I'm inclined to think that it does at least a little bit, because follow-on gives the states time to percolate for like lesson learning reasons, which something, entrepreneurialism something, whereas you are sequenced but immediate, so there would be like some less mitigation because like there's not time for the policy to get kicked around through the federalist apparatus before the federal government takes it on as their own after having undergone a process of policy learning from the counterplan. Like that stuff was all very late breaking and not particularly fleshed out. I would have struggled a lot to decide the debate based on those questions.
I can go next because I took the longest. So I was app obviously. This is a good debate, but like very late breaking and very shallow parts. Like I certainly intervened, so like I'll let you know in the thought process, like where I like did my own interpretation and I guess went Newtonian or whatever. So first, I did conclude that the perm substantively resolved the internal net benefit, but like I didn't think that was too relevant because I think the neg evidence that says that states need to take action beyond what the federal government is doing, which like I think the perm obviously does. I thought a lot about this. Like, is this perm intrinsic theoretically? The text thing, I thought it was too new, so like I wasn't just gonna like scratch it all right. The function stuff. So like for me, I spent the whole time thinking about can the app switch the order, for the delay issue. So I concluded yes, because I don't think you solve your internal net benefit, because if the 2NR is correct, that the states can take action, and the Fed simultaneously allows the states to do their own action, it doesn't do what your evidence says is entrepreneurial federalism. And
Sorry,
the
can you
2NR
repeat
even has.
that?
What's up?
Can you just repeat that?
Yeah, so if the 2NR is correct that states can take an action and the federal government simultaneously allows the states to do that own action, I don't think that is entrepreneurial federalism. And the 2NR even has a line that says the quote, the perm fails because it has the federal government take action without learning and engaging the states, which to me is a reason why there has to be a prior prerequisite state action. And then honestly, that sentence really did it for me because to me that indicates that there has to be state action first. And so I think for me the order thing was less relevant because it's I know that's most of what the 2R spends time on, but to me the 2NR line, and then there's some lines in the 2R that are just clearly this entire internal is about state action prior. Do you have a question?
Well, I thought the second plank is federal judiciary permitting the states.
Yeah, but so that to me that 2NR line, and then your internal net benefit is clearly about state actions prior to any federal action. Do you disagree with that characterization of your internal net benefit?
No, no. But I'm confused. But it's not. Okay, sorry. You're saying that the 2NR said.
So your answer to perm was, let me see. The perm fails because it has the federal government take an action without quote learning and engaging the states. So their permutation just has the states do it first, which I think solves your internal net benefit. And I don't think that's functionally intrinsic because the delay that is added is something that you need to the delay is also encompassed by the counterplan because in order for you to solve your net benefit, the states have to go prior.
Sorry, I'm kind of missing, what I'm misunderstanding is the federal government versus federal judiciary part is the federal government is not interacted with by, obviously federal judiciary part of the federal, but it's about the federal judiciary ruling that's legally permissible when the federal government has not acted.
Yeah, so what's your question or it's
So why is it that the second plank of the counterplan means that you don't solve the internal net benefit?
Well, I think it just has to be the states doing it first, and then the judiciary would have to do something in order for you to solve your internal. So I think their perm that has the states do it first and then do the plan is fine.
I think what you were saying is if the judiciary were to first rule that it's okay and then the states do it, it wouldn't create the friction or states doing new stuff.
I guess that is where I disagree.
Why?
I mean, that's the way I interpret it.
It's about federal government action over the plan, doing the plan, not the judiciary ruling is legal.
But I don't think that entrepreneurial federalism, that your evidence, if it is ruled legally permissible by the federal judiciary, I don't think that's what your internal net benefit is about. Because they've been given that legal permission of the states, and they're not
But
contributing.
the federal government has not acted in that instance to do that.
But they've been given authority by the federal judiciary.
But that's distinct because that's the legal permissibility of the states doing it versus the federal government actually taking action in that instance.
I guess I don't understand the distinction, but also for me that just means that the app gets to permute that delay portion.
Which delay portion?
Well, I guess we are at an impasse where I think that the counterplan necessarily involves some element of delay, so the app gets to permute.
Okay.
Yeah, which
and where do you understand that delay occurring?
What's up?
Where do you understand that delay occurring?
Oh, I think you have to have state action prior to any federal policy at all.
Even prior to the federal judiciary ruling.
Yeah, and I understand maybe that's the holdup. And so I guess the last thing I'll mention before Rebecca's and then you can ask all your questions is I really do think this
this debate is like breaking confusing, and so like I was more inclined to vote F, given that like the 2NC like randomly has a new competition model, and like even the 2NR you're like super confused, which like I kind of understand why you're confused at some points, but just like I don't know, it's just like either of those wasn't going great, and just so like I'm looking for basically some slight out to vote F, and so like I did have like a neg val written, but just like I honestly was like pretty confused, and so some of these like lines, like especially that one about like maybe the state learning and stuff, just like really resonated with me in a way that like I might have looked into too much, but just like the debate is like very shallow at this portion. So like I understand your frustration. I'm happy to answer your questions after Margaret goes.
Yeah. I like saw the debate very similarly to Jim, and I concluded that the term was not functionally intrinsic because like I sort of agree with the 2AR characterization of the counterplan as including some element of delay or sequencing. I don't really want to rehash it because like my understanding was that like the states do the plan, and then after that happens, like the federal government would like look at that counter plan and just like learn from it and then rule that it's legally permissible. And if that's true, like if that's not true, it's sort of tough for me to just make sense of what the counter plan is, because it seems to rely on just like the federal government just like learning from the stuff that the states are doing in order to just like access the net benefit. The other thing that's weird is like I don't know, like MSU at the top of the 2AR is like they are conceding that the plan happens as like an outcome of the counter plan. Like you say in the 2NC follow-on, they like concede that, and that means that the counter plan like results in the plan at some point. And then if it is true that just like they're allowed to permute just like any element of delay or sequencing, then I think that that permutation is legitimate.
So they permuted federal follow-on is your argument?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh. Huh.
Wait, like they permuted because the federal government
Follows like.
like the counterplan causes the plan, so they permuted that. Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
But that's not a mandate of the counter plan. Like that's a solvency argument now.
Yeah, but it's like you've made an argument that the counter plan results in the plan, and they just like conceded that. But I don't know, like they're allowed to do that because I think that there's an element of sequencing, which is the whole rest of the 2AR. So.
Okay, so my first question is like the deficit. Like how did you interpret the perm solving? Because the way I understand it is like, if the twin-R asserts, it would be seen as like directly after it. So productive friction doesn't occur. What is the 2AR response?
So two things. One is my interpretation, and like a simplification of basically their perm is do both, but states go first. So there would be productive friction because the states would be the one that initiated the plan, and since the plan has not happened, it is contributing to federal mandate. So I think the only disagreement between the way you saw the 2NR versus the way I saw it was whether or not they get delay to permute states first. So I think if they do,
but like how much delay is my question. Like we've said that since they have not specified the amount of delay, right, it would be perceived as right after. So there's no time for productive friction to occur.
I mean, like I guess like I did not see. Like, I didn't think there was like enough debating to distinguish, I guess.
Like, okay, the late breaking stuff, it's like, I don't know, like, what are we supposed to do, like, introduce this in the 1NC? Like,
I mean, like, yeah.
Like, why is it not a reciprocal burden for them? Like, why?
1AR was 1 minute on this, the 2AR was,
Oh, yeah, but like I don't understand the way the internal benefit competition stuff functions until the 2NC. It's like pretty blippy. And like, burden of proof, like it is your burden to explain why it competes, and when it's late, it's kind of your fault.
But they don't have to explain why the perm solves equally?
No, because competition is an egg burden. So like, and like I understand why you're frustrated, but I honestly was pretty confused.
Like that late breaking thing is true. I think that is totally reasonable.
Like as the debate played out, like what would you change if you were giving this 2NC or this like? Obviously, the 2NR is already too late to solve late breakingness.
Should we not say federal follow-on, or I'm just like, would that?
Well, not even that. Like
the follow-on thing, like didn't really matter at all because to me it's just a question of whether they can fiat states first, which I thought solved your internal. Let me look at the 2NC. I mean, I guess based on the 2NC, like there is really no way you could have predicted the 2AR to be like this like delayed perm first. So like I get it, but
I'll say this. I think that one comment that I was going to have about the block, just as a whole, is that like I thought that the disorganization generally was quite harmful to you, and that you didn't start off on the counterplan with a clear explanation of just like what are the mechanics. Because like I think that if you had accurately communicated that the only fiated role of the federal government within the counterplan is to say, hey states, we would like to learn from you. Here is a legal decision that allows you to act with free reign in this policy area. Like, I think that that resolves Jimin's thing. Because Jimin's like leading into a line of the 2NR that like, admittedly, like, I could totally put myself in Jimin's headspace. I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what the role of the federal government within the counterplan is. It is atypical, like, it is an atypical structure. So like earlier detail could be helpful in parsing some of these later stray phrases. I agree that given that the block was not, like, if I assumed that I had not understood the block, and then the 2NR, like, says a phrase, and then the 2AR jumps on that, there is no way around that. But the way to solve that is, like, I don't think that it is actually competition debate confusion that is causing your problem. It is, you just, like, didn't explain deeply and comprehensively enough what your counterplan was actually doing until earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I could totally imagine giving this decision.
So in fairness, I was also confused at MSU until like halfway through the 2AR. So, but that's just because like things at least it clicked a little slow for me too. Because like I was like in the turn, I was kind of like I was with you. Like I don't really know why this like yay nay text plus function versus function like matters that much. But yeah, I generally feel like breaking debates favor the AF, and so again like if we didn't see this, I apologize, but just like it's the way I interpret the stuff that was said.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like the 2NC just treats this perm like it's exactly like perm do both. Like you just assume that just like every answer to perm do both just also applies. And I think you just need to establish a lot of the stuff that the 2NR says about just like why just like allowing apps to permute delay is like bad for the neg just needs to be in the 2NC. And if all that stuff is like more extensive in the 2NC, then I think that then it's definitely a more winnable debate for you. But as it was, it's like I think there's a good 2NR on just like these sorts of perms are bad for the neg, and a good 2AR on just like these sorts of perms are like good for the AF, and concluded that the AF one was a little bit more persuasive.
Fair enough. Right 2NR, or should it have been?
Yeah, I think so. It was right 2NR. I thought DDEV was going pretty bad.
That's what I thought.
Like real bad. I don't know the other two.
I thought it was going okay. I had some concerns about the transition because you didn't really say anything about it. But I don't know, maybe try it out. Like,
yeah, they were quite good at framing. Like Tracy, even from the Tracy, they were kind of like
Yeah.
sustainability. So like so they're doing all that.
Did you have a different thought?
I guess I was confused.
Fair.
Like the disorganization didn't help there either.
Yeah.
Like, I guess by the end, you're not really going for any kind of social transition, you're just going for let the crunch happen, at which point I don't know how that's different than your DDEV impact, which, like, connected to their framing pretty effective. Like, I think that their framing is particularly effective at capitalizing on this specific version of debating the transition, which is, like, the way that you cause the collapse is, like, letting society collapse, but then what is your impact to the turn? Like, if your impact to the turn is just the poly crisis, then are you kind of saying the turn solves itself?
Oh, also, sorry.
Sorry, I guess I was confused on what their approach was. Is this the no link argument, or is this the no transition
I
argument?
get, like, they did phrase it as no link, but, like, it doesn't, it's obviously not a no link. It only wouldn't, like, the only reason this makes sense is because you adjusted your explanation to be our only transition debating is, like, the recession literally destroys all the economic activity. But the way that they cause a recession is, like, the recession is, like, it's connected to this poly crisis. So if the way that you cause the transition is letting the poly crisis happen, how is your DDEV impact different than the poly crisis?
Okay, makes sense. So do we just need like no poly crisis cards, or?
Well, no, because your sustainability wall is yes poly crisis. You need
Like transition possible.
You need, like, if you truly believe in the poly crisis, the idea that the AF solves the poly crisis is hilarious. Like, obviously ridiculous. They prevent one, you phrased it as, it is ridiculous that this is all an outcome of financial collapse. But the ridiculous thing is that solving financial collapse is sufficient to solve the rest of the poly crisis. Like, really, the poly crisis is, like, the best neg sustainability argument ever. So like, and yes, it is, of course, it is an impact. It's like, yeah, if you broke the world, like that would probably cause a lot of like second order ramifications. But like, the premise of polycrisis is that you cannot actually solve any single input and then expect the whole problem to go away. That's the entire reason why this term has any meaning. So really, this is just an amazing sustainability argument. It demonstrates that disinformation turns financial crisis. It demonstrates that every other thing on their stupid list of risks turns financial crisis. Like, I'm sure you've seen these, like, the pictures and all these reports with all the, like, bubbles with all the arrows going everywhere. Like, that demonstrates that you can't just pull out a bubble and then the problem is solved. Right?
Yeah.
So, but, like, the way that you all debated that didn't, like, it played maximally into their framing, which I think did not really serve you here.
That makes sense.
Also, real quick, I was confused on the politics TA. I don't know about you two. And I also think you read an internal to global economic collapse, but I could be wrong. Your like 1NC card randomly is just like this would collapse the global economy.
Yeah, it
but I
does.
think
Yeah.
Okay.
It does. They
Yeah,
did
at
say
least-
that, but it does.
at
That's why I
least
marked it.
Yeah, things just need to be like lined up earlier. Yeah.
Anything else? Do you have anything? Go for it.
Two questions for Rebuttal. I guess anyone can answer the first in particular, which is, you said that the two AR seemingly agreed with the Ned framework about how you should determine, like, if the counterplan is coherent when you flip the planks. One thing that I spent a little bit of prep time thinking about is, like, a counter frame that would be favorable and, like, self-serving, frankly. And I couldn't come up with one. Does anybody have any ideas on a way that I could come up with, like, a counter frame for evaluation? Because I kind of can say whatever I want because it's the 2AR, so I should be as rude as I want.
Inevitably, it is the case that their counterframe asks you to think not just about the text, but what the functional ramifications of each version of this text would be. So, the way that I would counterframe it is, if they're like connected to the strategy, not just the like functional possibility of the plan being written that way. The problem with writing the counterplan in the other temporal order would have been that the entire net benefit would have stemmed from the judicial precedent that gives states permission to act in a place where there is a gap. If that was a disembodied legal decision that was not made with reference to any particular state action, the counterplan would have been trivial to permute because you could have permuted the judicial decision that is made without reference to anything. And in fact, you did that, and they answered that argument by saying no. You can't do that because the entire premise of our argument is that these rulings must be made with respect to particular state experiments, and therefore it doesn't solve. Remember, like on the other issues perm, they said, actually don't even, did you even say other issues? I'm not sure.
Sort of.
Whatever, but like in the like perm mush, at some point in the 2NC when they were like saying stuff about stuff, they said that it wouldn't solve because ironically specificity key, deeks, whatever. And then like that to me is the place where I was having a similar reaction to Jimin on just like, well, obviously this is a part of the next strategy that wouldn't work if the counterplan was sequenced in the other direction. Like, there's nothing about the physics of the counterplan that would be like literally impossible to understand if that was the way that it was. But like strategically, you can see that that is what is happening. Now, in truth, does that mean that that necessarily imports this function into the counterplan text? No, I don't, probably not. At that point, it's pretty late breaking and like probably, like you're allowed to make this counterframe and it would have been a reasonable counterframe and that probably would have gotten me, honestly. You know, Moorbeck was saying a similar thing, I think, which is like, if I think about the counterplan in this way, then what net benefit am I voting for? Like, do I think that the counterplan solves anything? I guess my counter thinking about that would be, well, but if the counterplan doesn't fiat that sequencing, then that would imply that there is some risk that the counterplan happens in the wrong order, which would be percentage risk mitigation of the counterplan's ability to solve the net benefit, but not an absolute takeout to the internal net benefit. So while the counterplan doesn't fiat the sequence that is clearly necessary according to the neg to solve the specificity that is required to produce the internal net benefit, that only means that there is a chance that the counterplan doesn't solve the internal net benefit, which outweighs the chance that the permutation, or which outweighs the chance that the app is necessary to solve some impact to the case.
Yeah.
Like that would be my like actual way of thinking about it that I think is correct.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I think if the 2AR was that, then like, given we're in late breaking world, you probably would have been okay.
Okay, well,
but does that make sense?
Yeah, that was my second question, which is like, you said you could have seen yourself more like Jimin, how do I get you there? And the answer is probably like
They-
reframing the question and focusing more on like the strategic benefit that they receive via an internal link to a net benefit based off of the counterplant's order. Like some of my questions, so I put like the Twitter post of rhetorical questions that was like, what would the like grounds for this really be? Like, where's the test case if you flip the order? And it seemed like I was sort of like pecking at that and just like at the door. But
Right,
some,
and it's
instead
like-
of just being like theoretical questions, being like, no, like they strategically gained an advantage. This is the internal link to the
Yeah, like-
benefit. It
like-
requires this order.
Exactly. Like,
Okay.
I think you were trying to debate a question of like, why does the counterplan have to work this way by the fixed requirements of
Yeah.
the counterplan? Whereas what you should have been debating is like, we know from context what they must have meant, because if this is not how the counterplan worked, we could have immediately made it disappear with this trivial permutation.
That makes sense to me.
And like, this is all part of, you know, like, we had a little bit of a conversation about this after some of our plan in a vacuum encounters, where you were like, what is the alternative to looking at the plan text in a vacuum? And this is like part why I said at the very beginning why I like this debate so much, is like, stuff like this framing of how to interpret things that happened in the debate and what ramifications that has for like what functions various things have is exactly the kind of debating that I would want to replace plan in a vacuum as a model for determining what the mandates of a plan are.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so not like this stray word in the solvency card means that the counterplan must be this way, but like if you think about the structure of the strategy, this strategy would not work but for this
Yeah.
mechanism.
Yeah, like hearing your decision, it seemed entirely consistent with
Yeah.
the reason that you don't like when I go for plan in a vacuum.
I would also add just like, I like the question. I try not to look too much into it just because like, you know, like 2AR, but yeah, I was gonna say like, if you should just say like, if there's any confusion, just like we get to define what they did just because like they didn't. I don't know, like that might be helpful as well. Like this is true like regardless of what side you are. And the other thing I'll say is like, I don't know, I think you get some mileage on perm by using the fact that you have the word start in your plan, but I haven't really thought about 100% how you deploy that. That
Yeah,
seems.
there's a little something there.
Oh, okay. I was just saying.
I was thinking about that, but
Yeah.
because presumably we're like beginning a process immediately, but that process could take however long it needs to take, which implies process implies time frame. But
Yeah. I guess the next should just say T.
That occurred to me, but start to use.
No.
Oh, it's just-
T should must be certain. You didn't finish it. You just started it. Probably neg. I don't know.
Another question I had was like the tuner made this argument, and this for everyone, that like, you know, even if they're right, the element of time frame that it adds is between the states and the federal judiciary. The permutation moves that element of time frame from the middle to the back end of the counterplan.
Yeah.
Is that anything?
I think that you are doing yourself a disservice by even agreeing with the F's premise that sequencing is an element. Like, sequencing is not an element. Sequencing, if you stripped the other parts of the counterplan, sequencing would have no meaning. So like, there's no particle of the counterplan that you could point to that is like, that's the sequencing part, which you can then grab and move somewhere else. Sequencing only describes a relation between two other parts.
Yeah.
So this connects to, and this again is like, this is going way deeper than like even remotely happened here, but you would want to tie that back to the definition of a function. Like you would say, function is agent doing action. Sequencing is not agent doing action. It is describing a relationship between two other functions, but it is not itself a function. And if competition is determined by functions, then the addition of sequencing specifies a relationship between those two other functions. Incidentally, you can repurpose this phrasing af to say, no, sequencing isn't a function at all. It is a specification of a relationship between functions in time.
where does that get us though? Like I understand
It's
the
not
difference.
functionally intrinsic because there are no functions in the permutation that are not in the counterplan or the plan. You just specify a relationship between the functions that are available in the debate in time. Whereas you would want to be
But
like,
then-
no, that permutation says function counterplan, or function counterplan, then function weight, then function plan. And function weight is nowhere because
Yeah.
all that's in your thing is an incidental outcome of a relationship between the two functions that you did fiat, and they added function weight.
Okay.
I think
That makes sense. If they make the sequencing argument though, then wouldn't the neg say then there's nothing to permute because there is no element of sequencing or there is no delay?
Sorry,
Like
what?
if like sequence is not a function, you know, then what is there to permute?
The relation between the two functions that are there.
And then there's nothing that's intrinsic. because there was.
Okay,
It's not
okay,
functional.
okay, okay. That makes
I
sense.
just like I would be lying if I said that I had like if this was a completely cooked theory of like how to talk about counterpoint functions, but like it is certainly a plausible way for the app to talk about this. Like Salt85 says this about like why logical perms should work against the abolish the topic counterplan. Like his thing is like to the extent that there is any degree of intrinsicness, it is a minimally harmful degree of intrinsicness because it only specifies a sequence, it does not specify a time frame.
You said that
Go
was.
hunt for that.
You said it was Salt 85.
Yeah, I can hook you up.
No, I'm really not that deep. Yeah.
Is it counterpoint competition permutations and beyond?
Shout out
Is that
Robert
it?
Hill, though.
Clarifying water policy?
Sorry, I'm now searching my computer for the word fuck because I cut this card to. Okay, 1 second. Give me a moment.
No, Truth is on his most visited URL. That's Roger's. Wait, real quick, why is the second part of this counterplan there?
To fiat in the net benefit.
Do you need?
Or else preemption. is
Otherwise,
just
it gets struck down.
Okay, I was gonna say it's the preemption thing, but I don't know. I just feel like that's fair enough. I just think you solved the internal better without the second part, but maybe I'm missing something.
like just states do it,
Yeah.
but then preemption. No?
Okay, you have your internal. I guess like yeah, I understand. Okay, now it's a solid.
Like then we'd have to win that courts would rule against
Yeah, then we have to actually answer
the
solve.
federal government.
Oh yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I figured it was preemption, but yeah, I feel like it solves your like competition, like and all this like all this like competition stuff and gets you your internal much faster.
That's what I was gonna ask is like, so 2NC overview needs to explain the counterplan. Is there anything else major that needs to be shifted because we're gonna read
I
this
just
again?
think like anything that like a junior in high school could not understand within 10 seconds, you should need to add like an extra sentence or two. Because like I don't do like debate full time anymore, and I like this is the first time I've seen this counterplan. So like, and basically like it might go your way most of the time, but just like if the tutor just like cleans up, or if I misinterpret something, you just want to hedge back against that. Just like an extra sentence or two would have been nice. Like I don't think the 2NC was like bad. It's just like I'm like gonna be slower at processing than like the people who are in debate full time.
Yes, that's the right one.
And
Yeah, counterpoint competition permutations and beyond is the
Is
correct
this where you downloaded all these random articles?
that was like something else.
Control F, a second way in which this, that's that paragraph.
Last thing, sorry. I haven't fully thought through the solvency implications of this, but if the 2NR said you can judge kick the first plank if they win the perm, and then just fiat in the DA with the second plank,
The second thing is just judiciary should allow states to do.
and then
Well, there is a judge kick that is conceded and floating out there. So like, to the extent that that is how that works, that is something that we would have had to do as part of this decision process.
2NC said judge pick?
Twice. Like once in the overview on the advantage counterplan and then once in the conditionality.
That would
block.
make sense to me.
I don't, it is not obvious that judge kick should work on a plank by plank basis.
Oh, I have it on advantage, yeah. No, fair enough.
Yeah, I had it on the other counterplan, but
Oh, no, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I judge kick that plank, then it solves the reason it's not competitive based on the term, so that makes sense, yeah.
Without you telling me, I'm not gonna do that.
yeah.
And the reason is not that although I did forget about this interaction, so I would not have done it in this debate because you didn't bring it up, but also my default, unless people say something, is that judge kicking a plank effectively amends the counterplan, not kicks it. I'm open to the opposite view, but
yeah, does Twitter get to like have some new perm thoughts when the 2NR kicks half the counterplan or no? I guess the
Yeah,
ones,
definitely.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm super, yeah.
because I mean, there's a whole new
Yeah, no,
world to
100%.
be had over
obviously,
there.
yeah.
Okay. It just kind of seemed like everyone was like, well, judge kick happened in the block, so you're hosed, and I just want to make sure that we were all kind of
Yeah, no, you go.
okay
Well,
with
again,
Twitter,
like,
having some
Totally
feelings about
changes
that.
the big, yeah.
I think judge kicking the entire counterplan happened in the block.
Yeah.
It is not an obvious extrapolation of the way that
And
that
they
was
could kick,
presented,
like,
that you
half
can
of
kick
it.
half of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, I think judge kick, theoretically, yes, no is distinct from like, if they were to get judge kick, you get new answers like substantively. If that makes sense.
You think I would be able to get a new deficit in the world where the 2NR stands up and is like kick the first
I think so,
counterplan?
yeah.
Really?
Honestly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're just like, obviously, the counterpoint doesn't work without the second plank, then like, yeah.
Yeah.
it seems fine.
I think that there's an argument that any time that the function of the counterplan as a policy package changes in any capacity, that is akin to introducing a new counterplan.
Yeah, and we're all like,
Including advantage counterplan, you kick a plank, like, I think there's an argument that that gives the app free reign to do whatever the hell you want.
yeah,
But, like,
okay.
certainly it's a sliding scale, like depending
Well,
on
but just knowing
exactly
like
how it's
your
all
the
presented.
three of your positions,
But
like
here,
I
yes.
kind of get to say what I want to say.
Yeah, well, especially if it's an egregious, if it's like advantage compound that says like drill more oil and then be nice to the environment. If they pick like one of those, like obviously the meaning is
It's
very
a new
specific,
one.
yeah. But even if it's not super meaningful, I would be open to.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, that's good to know for the future.
True, did you have any, you were looking for the article, do you have any thoughts on things we should change structurally about this counterplan except for 2NC overview? And answering the delay thing in the block, yeah.
As the debate was happening, I thought it was kind of odd that you were not saying more different stuff. What I'm now sitting here thinking through is, am I only thinking that because I'm only accustomed to the wall of noise version of debating this set of competition arguments, and therefore it is jarring to me that that is not what I heard? Or am I saying that because that is actually better? Like the part of this approach that I liked was again that like you had clearly put like, am I right that this like 2NR blurb on like instruction of determining if there is sequencing was something that was like
2NR prep.
that was like a thing that you thought about when you wrote the text the way you did?
What do you mean?
You came up with that during prep?
Yeah.
Oh, that is okay. That wow, nice. Yeah, really good work. I've never thought about it that way. I thought that was very, very smart. Okay, well, if that was not the plan, then certainly, I guess you accidented yourself into a good version of what you did, but the bad version of what you did is certainly worse than the version where you also read a bunch of definitions, because in that version, the 1AR cannot do this in a minute.
So read definitions.
So like, yeah, read definitions, also say they
As
sound
in, like,
immediacy,
should,
also
immediacy.
say like, blah, like, just do the wall, and then like, just only because it is a steeper hit, like, even the debaters at the highest levels make execution mistakes, like, I don't know, it's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've never
I don't
seen a debate this in depth on whether or not delay is function, like sequencing text, like that was cool. So yeah, good stuff.
I mean, my concern with like introducing the immediacy parts is that it makes it even more confusing, you know, like, and it's an uphill battle, like equally debated, I don't think we're winning that.
No, I hear you, but I also like, I don't really think that the place where you were losing people is that they were confused about the competition debate in a way that you not doing that in the block solved. Like, I think most of people's confusion stemmed from you just didn't explain how your argument worked and how all the different pieces interacted. And that is an overview problem / like a just other parts of the flow problem, not really a I chose not to read a wall on the perm problem.
Yeah, that makes sense, fair enough.
Also, like, push up that, like, now that we've come up with this metaphor during, or like this set of instructions during prep, like, put that in your block. Like, that was great.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Debate MC.
So just like a quick thing is everyone's getting like 20-hour time allocation.
Too much on egress, at least for me.
Yeah, that feels right to me, yeah.
I think it was right, like if you feel good about the term, then it's fine.
Perfect.
I'm probably the only one on this panel who wanted to hear more about the anti-market, but for what it's worth, I wanted to hear more about the anti-market.
The K?
Oh, I wanted
Yeah.
that too, actually.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh,
Really?
We were gonna go for it, but, oh.
It solves all the issues with degroup, which is transition, so, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Wait. Don't they have to win a transition for the alt?
Well, you know, it's just like, they
It's the
have
G&D
cascade
counterplan as the alt.
So how do you,
That's stuff.
what do y'all, how do y'all feel about this, like,
That,
all
that anti-market card is so good.
Yeah.
I am-
Sean Kennedy.
Like, oh, Dartmouth and USC have the same thoughts about LPE.
Wow, okay.
How do you think we can answer this, like, alt fiat question better? We've tried the whole, like, you know, it's not counterplan, we're not
I thought it was
answering
fine, I don't know. Like,
I
I think
just
it's a silly question.
I mean, like, I think you do have to be like, but you have to just like framework it out, you know?
The alternative is a different paradigm for organizing the economy.
Yeah.
We should compete, like, the framework argument establishes that stuff should compete at the level of paradigm.
Okay, fair enough.